Chapter 557. Elective classes were usually set on Thursdays and Fridays. Occasionally, there would be elective classes from Monday to Wednesday. When arranging classes, the professors would also pay attention to not let the classes overlap. But if they couldn't avoid it, they could only inform the students and let them choose one of the two. For example, alchemy class and night class were the first class on Thursday morning and couldn't be taken at the same time. Transfiguration class was the same as astrology class, set on Thursday night. As for medical class, it was on Thursday afternoon. Dake chose two classes. One was alchemy class on Thursday morning, and the other was astrology class on Thursday night. Probably because he stayed in the club classroom for a long time, when he arrived at the alchemy class, on the 4th floor of the castle, he found that the classroom was already full of people. He habitually entered from the back door. When he opened the door, the sound of the door opening attracted the attention of a few students in the back row. But that was it. The classroom could accommodate hundreds of people, but there were less than 30 people in it, ranging from 2nd grade to 5th grade students. The classroom was very quiet, not as noisy as the 1st and 2nd grade classrooms. Remember, https://m, VIP can't you? VIP. Even if they were talking to each other, they would try to lower their voices as much as possible. Most of the people were quietly reading. Alchemy class wasn't an easy subject to learn. Its practicality was far inferior to Introduction to Magic in this era, but the learning difficulty was much higher. Students who chose alchemy class, even if they only came because of its reputation, usually had an extremely high learning ability. In other words, the students in the classroom were all top students of their respective grades. Dake slowed down his pace and walked forward. He found that most of the people were sitting in the front row. It seemed that they wanted to better admire the master alchemist. The middle and back rows were almost empty. Considering that sitting in the last row was too unsociable, he sat a bit forward. Of course, he still sat near the window. The windows in the classroom were basically open, and the wind from outside carried a trace of the morning chill. After Dake sat down, he took out the magic language textbook. There was still some time before class, so he prepared to revise the magic language knowledge he learned yesterday. However, after flipping open the textbook, his gaze involuntarily swept across the classroom. Surprisingly, there were many familiar students in this classroom. In the 2nd year alone, there were Saraswati, Aima Matisse, Eudora Enway, and Vanessa Bolt from the Clubhouse of Fools. When Dark saw the 2nd year class leader of the House of Fools again, his eyes finally showed some surprise. Professor Kazair had only selected 5 2nd year students, one from each school, to be selected along with Sarah and Aima. This Vanessa Bolt must have some precious qualities that didn't show in her appearance. Dake paid more attention and looked at the students from the other grades. There were more 3rd year students than 2nd year students, but there were still 7 of them. Among the 7 3rd year students, the only one he knew by name was Elsie Kevin, the senior he had defeated in the cultivation tournament. Elsie Kevin had also won the Crimson Star award in the 1st year, and was one of the top students in the Noble Academy. Dake didn't think that he would one day be in the same classroom as this senior. However, he wasn't familiar with the other 3rd year students. Even if he met them in the castle, he wouldn't be able to remember their names. However, among the 4th year students, there were a few whose names he knew. The 4th year students could be said to be the most numerous in this classroom. Dake counted and found that there were 12 of them. The descendant of the famous Winter Sage, Winnie Scatty, was one of them. There was also another senior from the 4th year of the Magic Engineering Department, someone Dark was quite familiar with. Angelia Hudson. She was a 3rd year student who had only joined the duel club for the first time. Dake had a deep impression of her. Other than Winnie and Angelia, the 4th year student from the Noble Academy, Mike Owen, had also chosen this elective course. In addition, the 4th year student from the House of Fools, Tom Nixon, who was born in the slums and had a deal with the Blood Mistress, was also sitting alone in one of the rows. This senior, Tom Nixon, seemed to have a good relationship with the White Gouda, because of the Blood Mistress. There are really more acquaintances in the 4th grade than I imagined. Dake smacked his lips and finally looked at the 5th year students. There were only 6 5th year students. Unfortunately, Panduola Doragon wasn't among them. Dake didn't pay much attention to the other fifth-year students, and could only recognize one of them as the current head of the duel club, Inia Knight from the Knights Academy. The other person was the fairy princess, Iluri Clarissa. This senior, who had royal blood and was known as the princess, had appeared in the Easter Duel Festival, but after 30 rounds of fierce battle, she lost to the Dragon Slayer, Luke Beige. Other than that, he couldn't name the other 4 people. But thinking about it, they were all outstanding students. Dake only observed for a moment before retracting his gaze. Although it felt good to be able to attend class with so many outstanding seniors, the seniors wouldn't help him. However, the seniors would not help you learn. In the end, what you could learn and how much you could learn would depend on yourself. Dake quickly focused on the textbook. But not long after, a pink-haired sweetheart quietly moved something to the seat on his right. Dake glanced sideways and noticed that Eudora was staring at the table. Her ears were red, and she was in a state of complete isolation where she had lost her ability to communicate. He couldn't help but smile helplessly, but he didn't deliberately let her go. Today was different from the past. Dake Dimming was no longer the youth who could be easily aroused by bliss. He had a considerable degree of luxury. Ring, ring, ring. As the class bell rang, Professor Kazair walked into the classroom very steadily. When he reached the podium, his height suddenly jumped by a lot. Dake, who was experienced in this, naturally knew that there was a stool hidden under the podium. Professor Kazair waved his magic wand lightly, and the flickering fluorescence left waves in the air. He was full of energy, smiled, and said in a kind tone, "Thank you very much for choosing this alchemy course. Although alchemy is already the embers of the era, we can always find some remaining sparks from the embers. I hope that in the next year, you can also learn something beneficial to your own growth from my class. If that's the case, I'll be satisfied." His voice seemed to have its own magic, and the 30 students below the stage couldn't help but focus their attention. Professor Kazair's gaze swept across the faces of the 30 students for a moment. Then he smiled and said, "As for the self-introduction, there's no need for that for now. I already know each of your names, so I'm sure you all know my name." Even so, he still wrote his name on the blackboard. Then he continued, "At the beginning of the class, I want to know how much you know about alchemy. Who wants to share your opinion? What is alchemy? What is alchemy?" They couldn't help but think. His understanding of alchemy was actually more derived from the information gathered from various works in his previous world. He didn't have a deep understanding of alchemy in this world. Alchemy was like magic. It required a large amount of knowledge as a prerequisite, which made people flinch. However, if he had to generalize, he still had some understanding of what alchemy was. However, just as he was about to take the initiative to raise his hand, he realized that there were already arms in front of him. "Good students, you really know how to answer." Dark couldn't help but put down the hand that he had just raised and prepared to be a listener. Professor Kazair's gaze immediately swept across the students. Then he pointed at AI Ma. AI Ma immediately stood up. Even though she was in class with so many senior students, she didn't seem to be nervous. Her voice was as clear as ever. The so-called alchemy, in my opinion, is actually a kind of transaction. Alchemists pay a price and make a transaction with the gate of truth, thereby obtaining an equivalent return. This is alchemy. As AI Ma spoke her opinion, the senior students had different expressions, but most of them put down their hands and carefully chewed. Professor Kazair's face showed a visible smile. Then he immediately raised his voice and said, not bad at all. Although there are slight flaws in the sentence, this is indeed an explanation of alchemy. AI Ma Matiska, 5 points. So, student Kevin, what new ideas do you have? Elsie Kevin stood up, first glanced at AI Ma who had already sat down, then said, Student AI Ma Matiska and I have different understandings. Although alchemy has always been labeled as equivalent exchange, how do you measure the value of something? What we think is equivalent, is it really equivalent in alchemy? Even in the ordinary market, the value of everything changes with time, not to mention materials used in alchemy. Therefore, alchemy can't be a simple equivalent exchange. Professor Kazair's eyebrows moved, then he smiled and said, Good idea. So what do you think alchemy is? Elsie Kevin couldn't help but straighten her back and said, I personally think that alchemy is magic. Although there are differences in the name and the casting methods are different, alchemy is alchemy. However, alchemy is undoubtedly the same as magic. It also requires the support of magic, and is also used to create extraordinary items. Professor Kazair was obviously very happy with Elsie Kevin's eclectic answer. He clapped his hands and said, Everything can be seen from different angles. Try to do it, think about it, and then there will be new discoveries. 5 points for Elsie Kevin. Tom Nixon, you're here. Tom Nixon of the 4th grade House of Fools stood up, and there was a hint of ridicule in his eyes from under his black bangs. He glanced at Elsie Kevin and said, Professor, you can't just indulge your students. If this junior Kevin's words were in ancient times, when alchemy was popular, he would be arrested and burned to death. The equivalent exchange of alchemy is not something that can be compared with market prices. Junior Kevin thinks that the value of an item can change at any time, so it can't be measured. But as long as you have some understanding of alchemy, you know. The value of alchemy is originally different from general knowledge. Its standard has always been engraved in the gate of truth. And the gate of truth has long been proven to exist. Elsie Kevin heard the ridicule in his words and suddenly frowned. I didn't deny the principle of equivalent exchange. Moreover, has the gate of truth's standard for measuring the value of an item remained unchanged for thousands of years? If so, why are most of the alchemy formulas handed down from ancient times unusable? Tom Nixon looked at him and raised his eyebrows. That's what I want to learn. Seeing that the two were about to argue, Professor Kazair quickly interrupted. It's not a bad thing to have one more opinion and one more train of thought. Does anyone have a different opinion? At this time, most of the students in the classroom had already put down their hands. But when Professor Kazair asked again, someone raised their hand again. Kazair raised his magic wand and pointed at her. Winnie Scardy stood up and attracted the attention of the whole classroom. Whether it was the 3rd or 5th grade, they were all paying attention to her. She put her hand on the book and said, Alchemy, in my opinion, is a tool to explore the truth. Alchemists, in order to spy on the inside of the gate of truth, excavate the truth from the gate of truth, and find ways to make the gate of truth react. And these methods are alchemy. Tom Nixon immediately retorted. How can alchemists be so noble? In the beginning, alchemy was just a technology developed for the purpose of refining gold. He used to be a very low-key person, but after he displayed his brilliance in the Easter Festival of Extinction, he changed his usual self and became high-profile. However, Winnie Scardy obviously didn't want to pay attention to him. She just sat down after answering the question. It was just like a formulaic way to harvest credits. Professor Kazair motioned Tom Nixon to sit down, then waved his magic wand and said, Where did alchemy come from, and why did it come from, is a question that has not been settled. Some people say that alchemy is a technology that ancient alchemists researched in order to make gold, and some people use alchemy as a tool to explore the gate of truth, and some people even study alchemy for the purpose of longevity. The river of history is too long, and we have long been unable to explore it, but we can know where alchemy is going, and we can grasp it with our own hands. Now turn to the first page of The Secrets of Alchemy. Just when the students were wondering where the secrets of alchemy was, a golden light lit up in front of everyone without warning. Professor Kazair stretched out his magic wand, and a thick Secrets of Alchemy appeared in the golden light. Dake lowered his head slightly and saw the teaching material. Secrets of Alchemy could be called a book of gold. Before it was opened, it was like a gold brick, and the gold on the cover seemed to flow at any time. According to Professor Kazair's instructions, he turned to the first page. A small scale was drawn in the middle of the page, and below the scale were the words equivalent exchange. No matter how the value of a thing was measured, but equivalent exchange was still the basic principle of alchemy. In other words, measuring value was the responsibility of the gate of truth, and paying the price was the obligation of the alchemist. The fairness and justice of alchemy was based on the fairness and justice of the gate of truth. Dake turned to the second page and saw the title of the first chapter in the table of contents, Value. Before an alchemist mastered alchemy, the first task was to clarify the value of anything. From the perspective of the gate of truth, the alchemist evaluated the value of things. Only after confirming the value can they be placed on the same scale as wishes. The first alchemists didn't know the key. They evaluated the value of things from their own perspective. They thought that weeds must be worthless, and diamonds must be valuable. But from the perspective of the gate of truth, diamonds are weeds most of the time. As for alchemists who can't provide enough valuable items, they will either fail in refining or be devoured by the gate of truth, as greedy people. Of course, as Elsie Kevin said, the value of things in the gate of truth, eyes changes all the time. Therefore, we need to use a secret technique, the eye of truth. The eye of truth is a secret technique developed in the later stages of alchemy. After a powerful alchemist established a connection with the gate of truth, they successfully developed it. It allows us to measure the value of things from the perspective of the gate of truth. The closer the connection with the gate of truth, the higher the precision of the eye of truth. Our next main topic is to master the eye of truth. Professor Kazayer's teaching style had always been very simple. Other than occasionally interspersing a few lame jokes in the class, he had a very good grasp of the key points of the class. Whether it was to warn the students through examples, or to leave a sense of expectation for the future, it was all very easy. For example, in this class, seeing that the students were not interested in the eye of truth, he directly gave several examples and vividly described several very serious alchemy accidents in history. From the death of an alchemist to the destruction of a glorious country. Most of the alchemy accidents caused by alchemists due to the failure of alchemy were due to the mismeasurement of value. Without paying enough, forcibly opening the gate of truth was an act of self-destruction. These serious accidents in history finally alerted the students. 30 minutes before the end of the first alchemy class, Professor Kazayer stopped the lecture, put down the textbook and said, "Today's theory lecture will end here for the time being. Next, I will lead you into the gate of truth and feel the truth." The words that he said casually set off a storm below the stage. The second and third years didn't react for a while, but the fourth and fifth years were noisy in an instant. Even if they didn't have much contact with alchemy, the accumulation of knowledge was not a straight line. In the midst of the noisy crowd, Winnie Scardy suddenly raised her hand up high. When Professor Kazayer asked her to stand up and ask questions, her tone was even more excited than when she was on the dual stage. "Professor Kazayer, can we really enter the gate of truth?" Professor Kazayer smiled. "It's not difficult." "It's not difficult?" The classroom suddenly exploded, and the students' exclamations and discussions became louder and louder. Dake pressed his hand on the textbook and tried to demonstrate the shock in his heart. He had always placed Professor Kazayer in a very high position, but he didn't expect that he still underestimated him. Many alchemists spent their whole lives trying to touch the gate of truth. They even sacrificed their lives for it. However, not only did Professor Kazayer already touch the gate of truth, but he could even bring people in. Anyone who knew a little about this would know how terrifying it was. This was equivalent to allowing someone to directly access and understand the mysteries of calculus without even knowing the multiplication table. The point was he could really do it. Greed +1 Dake ignored the indicator in front of him and raised his hand. Professor Kazayer found him in the crowd and raised his magic wand. Dake understood and stood up and asked, "Professor, what can we get after entering the gate of truth?" Professor Kazayer said kindly, "Touch the truth, and you can feel the truth. After leaving a mark in the gate of truth, it will be easier to establish a connection and receive a response from the gate of truth. After establishing a connection with the gate of truth, you can open the eye of truth." Of course, this is only one of the more practical effects. Everyone has different gains after entering the gate of truth. You will gradually know after entering. Dake sat down after getting a satisfactory answer, but then someone raised his hand and said, "Professor, it is not safe inside the gate of truth, right?" Professor Kazayer smiled and said, "Follow me and you will be safe." The students suppressed their excitement and fear, and raised their hands to ask questions one after another. Professor Zayer also patiently answered their questions. It was not until 10 minutes before the end of the class that he suppressed the noise in the classroom and said with a smile, "After entering the gate of truth, you have 5 minutes to feel it. If you are lucky enough to get the favor of the gate of truth, you may be able to get the truth's answer. Students who are ready, put your head down. Yes, put your head on the table." The students responded one after another. They put their hands on the table, put their hands on their heads, and lay down. After Dake lay down, he noticed Eudora secretly looking at him from the corner of his eye, so he winked at her. Eudora's face suddenly turned red, and she buried her head in her arms. Professor Zayer's voice came into everyone's ears. "Close your eyes and listen to my voice. Even if the surrounding environment doesn't change, don't be surprised. The truth exists in the heart, and the gate of truth will open in the heart." The classroom gradually quieted down, and the little mages' hearts gradually calmed down. The complicated thoughts gradually smoothed out under the guidance of Professor Zayer, and the heart settled into the center. A magic card appeared in Professor Zayer's hand. The edge of the magic card flashed with colorful glaze light, and the card surface was engraved with a door that was twisted like a vortex. This was the gate of truth. It was a masterpiece that combined alchemy and magic technology. There was no second magic card in this world. Professor Zayer poured magic power into the gate of truth magic card, and the door on the card surface rotated. The whole picture gradually turned into chaos, and finally, only a very black dot was left. Almost at the same time, the same black dot appeared on the ceiling. This black dot rotated in the opposite direction, and reopened into a golden door that contained chaos. The whole classroom was dyed with a golden color, shining brightly. Professor Zayer slowly closed his eyes, but the students' eyes opened in their hearts. A water droplet fell rapidly from a very high place. Dake Dimming suddenly opened his eyes. There's no sound around. There's no color around. The most intuitive perception of a person was sound and light, followed by other elements such as smell. Dake was sure that he was no longer in the classroom, but he was in the classroom again. The entire classroom lost its color and became a ghastly white. The students lying on the table, the professor standing on the podium, the birds flying outside the window, and the blooming flowers all disappeared without a trace. Although this was different from the gate of truth he imagined, he didn't panic. Even if the surrounding environment hasn't changed, don't be surprised. It hasn't changed, but it's not completely unchanged. Dake stood up from his seat. The whole world was white, and even he himself was pale. Other than him, there was nothing that could move. It felt like time had stopped. He walked out of his seat and subconsciously walked to the podium, but nothing changed. So where is the gate of truth? Dake stood on the podium and fell into deep thought. He wasn't sure if he was the only one who experienced this scene, or if everyone was the same. He originally thought that his consciousness would appear in front of a huge door, and that as long as he stepped through that door, he would be able to reach the gate of truth. Even if he couldn't comprehend the mystery of the gate of truth, as long as he could leave some traces to open the eye of truth, it would be enough. But the gate of truth seemed to be playing a joke on him. He turned around and walked to the door, trying to open it. The door opened smoothly. He hesitated for a moment, then stretched out his foot a little. When the tip of his foot touched the ground, he suddenly jumped out. There was no obstruction at all, so he began to walk down the corridor. There was still no sound, no color, no smell, and no moving life other than him. It was as if he had entered a pale world where time had stopped. He even walked out of the castle and spent more than 5 minutes, but he still found nothing. There was no gate of truth. There was no gate of truth. There was nothing. Unknowingly, Dake had returned to the classroom, to the seat where he opened his eyes. He sat down again, then leaned on the table, maintaining the same position with his eyes closed. He hoped that when he opened his eyes again, the world would regain its color, but it didn't. He looked at the classroom that was still pale and colorless, and an extreme irritation suddenly surged in his heart. The fury +1 that flashed before his eyes made him have a bad feeling. But that irritation couldn't be controlled no matter what. He tried to use the underworld god spell in this world of consciousness, but he couldn't do anything. The structure of this world of consciousness was terrifyingly sturdy, and it was impossible to twist it with the beginner, underworld god spell. So his irritation went up a level, and fury erupted like a volcano. The gate of truth. As if to vent this anger, the air that was squeezed out of his abdomen went all the way through his throat and burst out. Dake Dimming slammed the table and stood up. Then the world suddenly collapsed. The collapsed bricks turned into yellow sand, and the whole world turned into an endless desert. The sudden collapse of the surface caused the gold diggers in the desert to be washed into the ground by the turbulent yellow sand. A corner of the ancient city was exposed to the blazing sun as the yellow sand fell, and the gold that covered the city shone brilliantly. Dake floated in the air like a ghost. Fury calmed down in an instant, and his eyes were filled with surprise and curiosity. This is the old site of the Golden Kingdom, the scene recorded in The Golden King and the Secret Treasure. AI Métis's voice sounded excitedly. I know where it is. Dake turned his head abruptly, but found that there was no one beside him. AI Ma's voice continued to sound, as if she didn't notice that there was a transparent ghost-like eavesdropper beside her. The collapse of the desert didn't stop because of the appearance of the Golden City. Instead, it continued to intensify. The black hole underground grew bigger and bigger, and the entire desert was swallowed by the black hole. In this apocalyptic scene, the scene in his field of vision collapsed again. When Dake came back to his senses again, he found himself sitting on a stool. There were no extra decorations around the stool, and it was surrounded by a narrow square space without any doors or windows. This time he didn't stay for too long. It seemed that only half a minute had passed before the world suddenly started to spin, and his consciousness was swallowed by chaos. In the classroom, Professor Ka-Zaire opened his eyes, and the golden door on the ceiling quietly disappeared. The students opened their eyes almost at the same time. Some people looked up with a blank expression, some people's eyes were bright, and some people suddenly stood up with lingering fear. Don't panic. Professor Ka-Zaire's voice flowed into everyone's heart, and gradually calmed down their intense emotions. When the students wanted to speak, he said again, don't speak. Hide truth in your heart. The students suddenly closed their mouths tightly. After Dake opened his eyes, he calmed down. He subconsciously turned his head to look at AI Ma and noticed that AI Ma was also looking back at him. The two looked at each other, and AI Ma immediately turned her head back. Dake chuckled in his heart. AI Ma learned the location of the Golden Country from the Door of Truth. She must be eager to tell him this news. But Professor Ka-Zaire's words made her shut her mouth. As for why Professor Ka-Zaire said this, it was probably based on the rule that the secrets of heaven cannot be revealed. Or after saying it out loud, he had to pay an extra price. This price might not be high, but of course it was better not to pay. However, if both of them knew, it wouldn't be considered a leak. Dake was more concerned about how to explain to AI Ma that he peeked at her truth. After going back, digest today's experience well. We will explain the composition of Eye of Truth in the next class. Professor Ka-Zaire left the classroom after the bell rang, but he didn't leave any homework. But the 30 students in the classroom were obviously not in the mood to think about homework. Some people's faces were flushed. They seemed to want to talk about their experiences in the Door of Truth. Some people immediately picked up their notes and buried their heads in notes. Some people looked left and right with a face full of curiosity. They were obviously very concerned about the experiences of others. It wasn't until a few minutes later that someone walked out of the classroom first. After that, the students gradually dispersed, and there were fewer and fewer people in the classroom. Dake waited until half of the people left before getting up. Eudora, who was beside him, had already packed up, but she had been sitting there motionless. It's time to go. Dake reminded helplessly. Oh, where are you going? Eudora said quickly. Dake smiled and said, I should be going to the club classroom. Huh. Eudora suddenly showed a very obvious disappointment. Dake's club classroom was on the spiral clock tower outside the castle. No matter what, it was impossible for him to go the same way as her. She originally wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to walk alone with Dark for a while. Days like this where Deanna and Luosi were not by Dake's side were rare. Then I'll go first. Dake waved at her and turned to leave the classroom. Eudora couldn't help but clench her small fist in front of her chest and comfort herself. There will still be opportunities in the future. After leaving the classroom, Dake didn't walk in the direction of the club classroom. He quickly found AI Ma's back and deliberately swayed in front of her. AI Ma's mouth twitched. In the end, she couldn't help but stop and grab the window to look at the scenery outside the castle before he left. He didn't have any other intention. He just wanted to make her look like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Rage -1. This trip to the Gate of Truth is really a double loss. Forget it, I'll just use Rage as the next research object. Dake glanced at the index of Rage. It was calm. Rage didn't exceed 100. It was still within the error tolerance range. He picked up his shoulder bag and walked to the spiral clock tower. After climbing the clock tower and pushing open the door of the club classroom, Dake suddenly raised his eyebrows. He saw little Dake on the sofa holding little Dake and telling a story. Changeable monster. Even his voice when he was young was imitated very well. The tone of his storytelling was also quite similar. He spoke tirelessly and captivatingly. And Miss Bird, who had taken off her feathers again, was holding his arm and laughing. He didn't know if she was playing with the horizontal bar or listening to the story. In the club classroom, only Luo-si was doing homework on the other side. Deanna hadn't come back yet. Class is over? Luo-si looked up and asked. Dake looked away from Miss Bird and saw Yagu walking out of another room with a plate of apple puree in his hand. Luo-si asked curiously, "What does alchemy teach?" Dake sighed. It's hard to explain. It was indeed hard to explain. His experience was completely different from AI Ma's. He couldn't understand what the Gate of Truth was trying to tell him. However, it was fine to talk about some things that had nothing to do with it. It's so nice to be in the same class as Sister Winnie. Luo-si was a bit envious after hearing Dake's explanation. But why was he so envious? Dake asked curiously. Don't you want to enter the Gate of Truth? Rose smiled and said, Of course I do. But surely not everyone can enter that place, right? Professor Kazair is very strict with the students. It's probably because of talent. Dake shook his head. If Professor Kazair still has classes next year, you can sign up. Luo-si smiled. Then I'll give it a try. While the two were talking, the door of the club classroom was suddenly pushed open. Deanna ran in happily. Her forehead was covered in sweat, but she didn't seem tired at all. Instead, she looked excited and her cheeks were slightly red. Seems like you learned a lot from this night class? Dake smiled. Deanna nodded vigorously. Of course. I'm the only second-year student in the class who tamed a devil beast. Devil beast? Dark paused for a moment and asked. Deanna said, Aren't devil beasts a subspecies of the earth dragon? Professor Wesley found a group of devil beasts and asked us to try taming them one by one. You don't know, that idiot Doran wanted to touch the devil beasts but when he saw it, but he was sent flying by its tail. Ha ha ha, Dake said. Wesley? Deanna said, Carlos Wesley, the professor of the third-year dueling class. He's so powerful. He made the group of devil beasts lie down and stop moving with just a stare. What about White and Luo Boat? Dake asked curiously. Deanna sat down and started from the beginning. She was obviously in high spirits and finished everything in a blink of an eye. The full name of the night class was Night Cultivation Class. The main content was night cultivation and related magic card system composition. However, at the beginning of the class, Wesley's classroom only taught night cultivation. It started from standing still, marching, holding a sword, and so on. The first half of the class was boring and unbearable, but the second half of the class changed to writing training, which made the 30 students excited. Most of the students who were recruited for the night class were second-year and third-year students, and most of them were from the Academy of Knights. The third-year students had some experience, so their performance in writing training was not bad. Although there were many second-year students who had done night training, devil beasts were a subspecies of dragon that relied on its hind legs to stand upright. They were very strong and bad-tempered, so they were very difficult to ride. Doran was sent flying by a tail. Luo boat was thrown off the back of a devil beast as soon as he climbed onto its back. White won the favor of a devil beast, but was immediately threatened by another devil beast. He was so scared that his soul almost left his body. I heard from Professor Wesley that the two devil beasts are a couple. Ha ha ha. Deanna's laughter was very healing. 5 and 1 10,000 plus. 190/233 asterisk. Asterisk 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 star. Chapter 558. Even though Deanna made it sound interesting, it was actually quite dangerous to have this kind of situation in the night class. However, since she didn't mention this point, maybe those devil beasts were good at stopping when necessary. It was even possible that they deliberately simulated the difficulty of the class. After all, the intelligence of the sky dragons was usually not low. However, when it came to riding training, Dake was really interested. He had ridden the green-eyed sky white dragon before returning to school, and he had never tried it again. Even though the Shung Malian Academy was spacious enough, the school rules clearly forbade riding. Only with the temporary permission of the professors or joining the riding club could one practice riding in the club's special field. In the duel competition, there was a competition mode called riding duel. It was quite popular recently, and it had a trend of becoming popular. After Deanna finished talking, Dake gave her a cup of black tea and walked to the sofa where the Ubisoft and the shapeshifter were. The Ubisoft was very sensitive to his scent. Since he entered the room, she had been reaching out her chubby little hands to touch him. First website. https://m. Vipcanshu. VIP. When Dake walked in front of her, she struggled to crawl out of the shapeshifter's arms and cried at Dake. Dark's heart trembled violently. He bent down and clumsily hugged the bird in his arms, mimicking the actions of the newlywed parents. The Ubisoft immediately calmed down. She clenched her fingers into fists and laid in Dake's arms, rubbing her face against his chest. After that, it was impossible to put her down. Dake had no choice but to sit on the sofa. He took the spoon from the yagu and fed her the apple puree bit by bit. He hugged her for 2 to 3 hours. When the Ubisoft put on her feathers and fell asleep, Dake was finally released. After that, he left the club's classroom, ate his meal, and went back to his dorm. Then he dove into the experiment. The problem with the curse cage was basically solved. Next, it was time for the official experiment. He bought a total of 3 sets of curse cage materials, but because the remaining materials could be used, the chances of trial and error were actually greater than 2. However, an archmage couldn't always think about trial and error before they started their training. Soul imprint was the attitude an archmage should have. They calmed down and began refining the curse cage. In theory, the spell cage belonged to the category of magic cards, but in fact, it had always been regarded as a magic elven card in the duel competition. Using the curse cage, he could temporarily seal demonic spirits, golems, and other simulated life forms and use them as magic elf cards. Its refining method was also compatible with both the magic elf card and the magic spell card. The first half of the process required the creation of the life foundation, like how one would create a magic elf card, while the second half required the engraving of a magic spell card. In the process of concocting the potion, Dake quickly focused and entered the zone. His first attempt did not go as smoothly as he had expected. A slight error in the amount of materials used led to the failure of the entire experiment. However, Dake quickly adjusted his state and perfectly avoided the previous mistake in his second attempt. In the end, he successfully refined a new curse cage. This success was completely within his grasp, so Dake was not too surprised. After muttering to himself for a while, he took advantage of the fact that his hands were hot and began the third experiment. An entire afternoon passed quickly, and Dake had 2 new curse cages in his hands. 2 curse cages. One will be used to seal the sub-ancient beast, and the other will be kept as a backup. Dake couldn't help but feel happy. The caution and effort he had put in for the past few days had finally paid off. No matter what simulated life form was sealed in the curse cage, it was regarded as a card of the same name in the duel. Only 3 of them could be placed. Now that 3 of them were gathered, there was still an empty slot. Dake's eyes turned slightly as he thought about whether there was a chance to obtain a different type of demonic spirit. The Academy's branch card and society card are both unique. Unless I disband the society and rebuild it, I might be able to obtain a new society card. However, the original society card might also be taken back, so it's not very reliable. Maybe I should change my mind and use the third curse cage to seal golems instead of demonic spirits? Dake couldn't help but rub his chin and ponder. It just so happens that I have an elective, alchemy, class this year. Let's aim to refine a simulated class, golem. As a product of alchemy, golems had always been divided into two classes. One class was based on the golem's attack, defense, speed, flexibility, endurance, and other combat strength factors. The other class was based on the similarity between a golem and a real life form. In the era before the concept of reality was expanded, the classes of golems weren't detailed enough. There were only 5 classes, which were 1. Simulated class. A poor imitation. 2. Similar class. Has a certain degree of similarity to a real life form. 3. Simulated class. Partially similar to a real life form, has a simulated thinking circuit, intelligence level of 2. 4. Simulated class. The structure is almost the same as a real life form, almost no difference can be seen. Intelligence level exceeds 3. 5. True class. This is a real life form. To give a few examples that were more recognizable, the patrolling golems in the Academy were level 3 simulated class. As for marionettes refined from living metals, they were at the 4th level, the simulated grade. As for level 5 true class golems, Dake had always suspected that the guardian golem of the noble house's tower, the feathered serpent, was a true class golem. Of course, he only suspected and wasn't certain. Only a master alchemist could refine a level 4, realistic grade golem. Dake obviously wasn't arrogant enough to think that he could grasp master alchemy with just a year of study. Thus, he only set his goal at level 3 simulated class. If he could successfully refine a simulated class golem, it would be considered an achievement in alchemy. But if this is my goal, I'm afraid it's not enough to just rely on studying in class. Dake calmed himself down, and his plan for this semester became clearer. Then he cleaned up the remnants of the experiment, fed the cat grass cat juice, and took the things he needed for the astrology class, and left the tower. Tonight's astrology class was after 7:30 p.m., and it was only 4:30 p.m. He still had a long time to rest. When he arrived at the club classroom, Luosi had already finished the medical class, and was doing homework with Deanna in the living room. Katrina, on the other hand, had moved a reclining chair to the circular corridor. She was reading a book while enjoying the scenery from above. It was very peaceful. Brittany seemed to have something to do and wasn't in the club classroom. How's Sister Kalien's class? Dake walked into the club classroom and asked casually. It's not bad. Luosi raised her head and said, many seniors have signed up for medical school, saying that they want to learn medicine and save people. Learning medicine alone won't save people. Dake sat down and turned his head to look for the sub-beast. Luosi couldn't help but put down her pen and asked curiously, what do you mean? Dake faced her, pointed at his temple, and smiled. Humans are made up of 3 parts: the soul, the body, and the consciousness. Ordinary medical skills can heal the body, and extraordinary medical skills can repair the soul. But the consciousness and the mind don't need medical skills. Luosi frowned slightly and said, but Sister Kalien told us that the consciousness and the mind can also be saved by medical skills. Psychological medicine was created for this purpose. Dake shook his head. You'll understand in the future. After that, he saw the sub-beast coming out with a diaper, so he walked over. After changing the diaper with the sub-beast, Dake tapped the sub-beast's head and led it to the open space between the 6 classrooms. The sub-beast seemed to have a premonition, and its eyes were filled with excitement. As Dake's only tamed demon, the sub-beast and the little demonic beast communicated quite frequently. Although most of the time it was the little demonic beast who was showing off, and the sub-beast only listened, it indeed knew a lot. It was a digitalized beast born for battle. It wasn't a tamed demon that had no offensive capabilities. Curse Cage would give it a new life. Are you ready? Dake took out a Curse Cage card from his card pack and asked the sub-beast. The sub-beast sniffed subconsciously. Although it didn't sniff any information from the card, it still nodded its head vigorously. At the same time, cute little heads popped out from various passages, and their eyes were bright and full of spirit. Obviously, the magical elves had expected Dake to come to the club classroom, and they immediately seized the opportunity to surround him. Dake didn't care about being seen. After the sub-beast nodded its head, he tapped the curse cage on the sub-beast's head, and the wooden cage on the card surface faintly glowed. In the name of Dake Dimung, magical summoning. In the blink of an eye, it was activated. Dake could clearly feel a large amount of magic being absorbed into the card, and it was obviously shrouding the sub-beast. The sub-beast widened its eyes, and it was fearless. Then it felt the wooden floor under its feet rising, and it was lifted up. Then, railings went straight down, and in the blink of an eye, they were all around, and a wooden cover was quickly sealed on top of it. A wooden cage was formed just like that. Dake took a few steps back. Golden magical runes appeared on every surface of the wooden cage, and they flowed upwards, and finally merged into a huge curse word on top of the cage. The sub-beast subconsciously raised its head and saw the curse word pressing down from top to bottom. Almost instantly, the wooden cage and the sub-beast were flattened by the curse word, and it turned into a piece of paper with the word curse written on it. Then the curse word suddenly turned into light and drilled into the curse cage card in Dake's hand. Dake looked down, and on the surface of the card, there was a small yellow dinosaur in the wooden cage. Is this the curse cage? After the sub-beast circled around the curse cage, it turned back to look at its master outside the card surface. Dake habitually stretched out his finger, wanting to poke its little belly, but he only poked the hard wooden cage. He smiled and said, "How is it? Are you used to it?" The sub-beast clenched its fist and shook its head. It didn't want to be in the curse cage. The purpose of entering the curse cage was to fight better. Dake saw that it was in a hurry, so he directly summoned it out of the curse cage, and then inputted magic to check the information. Card name sub-beast type, sprite card, level, for all, race dragon attribute, dragon/fire, magic power, 500, attack, 700 defense, 400, ultimate skill, small flame. Although it was an extremely rare 2-star familiar, it was still a non-aggressive familiar. Curse Cage, Sub-Beast, S magic power, attack, and defense belong to the lower sequence among the 2-star familiars. After transforming into a normal magical sprite through the Curse Cage, it had mastered the most proficient ultimate skill, Small Flame. Small Flame spit out a flame breath in the shape of a fireball from its mouth to burn the enemy. In concept, Small Flame was equivalent to the dragon's breath of the dragon species. Its power was definitely higher than the average attack, and its cooldown was not long. It was a conventional ultimate skill. In fact, Dark had already seen the sub-ancient beast's Small Flame in the dormitory, so he wasn't prepared this time. A scorching hot aura suddenly rose, and the sub-ancient beast that appeared was already excitedly spitting out fire. Dake looked at its satisfied expression and couldn't help but smile. After the sub-beast was born, it hadn't actually participated in or watched a duel. It was still in a state where it didn't know what a real battle was. It didn't know what true strength was. Even if it was full of battle intent, it was as weak as a chicken. However, this could all be changed. It just needed to evolve a little bit. Dake had done research on magical sprites like the digital beast. Before the sub-beast was born, the little demon beast was extremely special. From the beginning, it wasn't tainted by any great sin, so it had a high possibility of evolving according to the different types of great sin. This wasn't just because it was a little demon beast. Although the demon fox beast was also a growing digital beast, it couldn't rely on Pride 3 and Greed 3 to evolve. Instead, it could only rely on Bliss 3 to evolve. Other than the fact that the evolution path of the demon fox beast was limited, it was also because it was a creation of Bliss. From the moment it was born, it already had a home. Under normal circumstances, it could only follow the established path to the end. This situation was very similar to the digital beasts in the Digimon anime. They all only had one orthodox evolution path. Fortunately, the demon fox was originally a digital beast that was very compatible with Bliss. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to be refined so smoothly. Similarly, there should be the Diru beast. Dake's Diru beast could only rely on pride to evolve. Unless one day, Dake could master all 7 great sins. Perhaps there would be a change. But now he had the sub-beast. Like the little demon beast, the sub-beast not only had many evolution possibilities, but it also didn't have a fixed path by a single great sin. Pride, bliss, greed. With the help of these 3 great sins, can the sub-beast activate multiple evolution paths like the little demon beast? With a hint of doubt and anticipation, Dake took out the new Pride 2, Pride 3, and Pride 4 cards from his card pack. Before the astrology class at night, he still had at least 2 hours to experiment. In a series of Great Sin cards, the higher-level Great Sin cards could completely override the lower-level Great Sin cards. This way, he didn't have to wait for the sub-beast to evolve and degenerate before he could do the next round of experiments. I can do 2 rounds of experiments. Let's start with Pride, the only one that has the 4th level. Dake's eyes lit up as he said to the sub-beast, "Sub-beast, come here for a moment." "Okay, Dake." The sub-beast immediately retracted its flames and ran happily towards Dake. Dake couldn't help but smile. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Anyone who had watched the first episode of Digimon would never forget the courage of the sub-beast and the power and coolness of the battle Tyrannosaurus. Among the 3 great sins, Pride was the only one that could activate sub-beast, Tyrannosaurus, mechanical Tyrannosaurus, battle Tyrannosaurus. Of course, it could also be sub-beast, Tyrannosaurus, zombie Tyrannosaurus. If it mistakenly evolved into a zombie Tyrannosaurus, with the budding bond between Dark and the ancient beast, they would have to defeat it. Dake calmed himself down and raised Pride 2. "Do you want to become stronger?" "Yes." The ancient beast nodded its head honestly. Dake smiled. "Then close your eyes." The sub-beast nodded. "Okay." 3 seconds after it closed its eyes, Pride's dark golden light shone on top of its head. With the appearance of the Pride emblem, the curse cage, sub-beast's data began to increase at an extremely fast rate. Dake's attention immediately turned to the curse cage, sub-beast. But unlike before, it wasn't just the data that changed. The sub-ancient beasts on the card's surface had also undergone changes in their body shape. This change didn't happen to the little demonic beast, so it attracted Dake's attention. He couldn't help but look at it. He saw that not only was the sub-beast's body slightly bigger, but its skin had also become smoother and more textured. Its temperament had also changed slightly. It looked smarter. But the real difference between it and the sub-beast was that there were additional red belts on its arms. 2 red leather straps appeared on each of its arms, wrapping around one of its claws, making this new sub-ancient beast stand out from the rest. Dake. The new sub-beast that appeared from the light of evolution looked at Dake with a hint of pride. "Have I become stronger?" It asked this question, but it didn't want to get an answer from Dake. Instead, it asked for confirmation. Sub-beast mutated evolution, sub-beast S. Dake immediately inserted the information into the magic card and looked at it in detail. Card name, sub-beast S. Type, elf card. Level, *****. Race, dragon attribute. Dragon/fire, magic power, 1100, attack, 1500, defense, 1300. Ultimate skill, small flame, small explosion. It really became a 3-star elf. But its race and attributes didn't change. Its magic power and defense are relatively average among 3-star elves. Only its attack has reached the peak. There are 2 ultimate skills. In addition to the original small flame, there's an additional small explosion. Sub-beast's mutation and evolution was no doubt a pleasant surprise. And since it was already a pleasant surprise, there was no need to worry too much about its strength. Dake had almost no understanding of sub-beast S. He could only treat it as a brand new digital beast. But since there was such an evolution step in the middle, it most likely meant that Pride's evolution path wasn't leading to battle Tyrannosaurus. Although he felt a little disappointed, Dake didn't show it in front of the sub-beast. He continued to look at it. Small explosion. Store small flame in your mouth and spit it out. The power of the explosion is far greater than small flame. I see. Small explosion is an advanced skill of small flame. First I spit out small flame, then store it in my mouth and combine it with small explosion. Maybe I can achieve a surprise two-hit combo. Dark couldn't help but glance at the spying magic elves. After they all backed off, Dark ordered Yaga Beast S to release these two sure-kill skills consecutively on the ground. Boom. Boom. The two fireballs exploded one after the other, showing the difference in power between the two ultimate skills. Small explosion was much stronger than small flame, in terms of both the central strength and the range of its radiation. After releasing these two ultimate skills, Sub-Beast S's fighting spirit was even stronger. It suddenly turned to look at the elves and raised its claws to provoke them. Just as Dark was about to stop them, he saw two of the magic elves take half a step forward. Hawkman Wrestling and Demon Fox. They were both 3-star elves, and they both loved to fight. Even the cold Demon Fox was eager to give it a try. Then, Hawkman Wrestling, you can try, but you're not allowed to use your ultimate skills. Tisk, Hatcha. The Demon Fox retracted its foot, but the Hawkman Wrestling couldn't wait to step forward. Roar. Sub-Beast S sneered at the Hawkman Wrestling and hooked its finger. The Hawkman Wrestling's eyes turned cold. The two sides hadn't started fighting, but sparks had already been ignited. Dake slowly retreated to the wall and saw Katrina, Deanna, and Luosi poking their heads out because of the explosion. He signaled that everything was fine, and leaned against the wall to observe. Sub-Beast S vs Hawkman Wrestling. However, the duration of this battle was surprisingly short. The Hawkman Wrestling and the Sub-Beast S had a limited difference in their stats, but there was a huge difference in their fighting skills. The Sub-Beast S was a natural warrior, but the Hawkman Wrestling wasn't just a natural warrior. It had also improved. The moment the battle started, the horned eagle man pounced forward. Facing the sharp claws of the Sub-Beast S, it suddenly turned sideways and raised its wings. Its plump feathers were like a curtain that covered the Sub-Beast S's face, blocking its vision in an instant. Then, the Hawkman Wrestling nimbly spun and used its claws to dig into the Sub-Beast S heel, causing it to lose its balance. Then, it used its wings to press down on the Sub-Beast S, causing it to fall to the ground cleanly. The Sub-Beast S was knocked down in one move. When the pain from the back of its head traveled to its brain, it suddenly realized that it had been knocked down. Hatcha! The Hawkman wrestler, who had won with one strike, didn't continue to attack. He just spread his wings and retreated in a space glide posture, looking cool and unrestrained. The Sub-Beast S's little heart was quickly filled with this handsome figure. After it struggled to get up, it suddenly realized something. How was it? This battle? When Dake asked, the Sub-Beast S immediately patted its chest and said without discouragement, "I'm not strong enough, and I'm not handsome enough." Dake was pleased. Not bad. It's very important to have a clear understanding of your own strength. The Sub-Beast S clenched its fist and muttered, "So that's how it is. Being strong isn't just about strength. I still have a lot to learn." Dake. To be able to make the Sub-Beast S say, "There are still many things to learn under pride." The goal of this duel should have been achieved. But why did Dake feel that something was off? He suppressed the strange feeling and took Pride 3 into his hand. After understanding its own shortcomings and learning humility, the Sub-Ancient Beast S wouldn't be devoured by pride. After it evolved further, Dake said to the Sub-Beast S, "Prepare for the next round of evolution experiments. This isn't your limit." After hearing this, Yaga Beast S's eyes lit up. Then it turned its head to look at the Hawkman. But it immediately turned around and said, "No, the victory won't be a true victory. I can't be blinded by the desire to win." Dake. Dake subconsciously wanted to praise the Sub-Beast S for its extraordinary self-awareness. But before he could say it out loud, for some reason, it was as if a thorn had suddenly grown in his throat, causing him to choke and unable to say anything. He quickly calmed himself down and activated Pride 3. This time, The summoning took a full 5 seconds before the light of Pride 3 was released. The sub-beastess was bathed in the light of Pride 3, and the Pride emblem on its forehead became clearer and brighter. It could feel its emotions become more and more excited, and there was power rolling all over its body. When Pride 3's light was completely absorbed by the emblem, there was an even stronger light of evolution erupting from its body. Its body turned into a luminous body in this strong light, and then it began to grow rapidly. Roar! A roar burst out from the light, and it spread out with a rolling pressure. The luminous body expanded into a very obvious T-Rex shape during the evolution. Dake couldn't help but be surprised. Could it be that it can return to the T-Rex's evolutionary path? He immediately lowered his head and stared closely at the changes on the spell cage. Ancient Beast's magic card. The evolution was complete at this moment. The name on the card also changed from Curse Cage, Ancient Beast S, to Curse Cage, Earth Tyrannosaurus. Earthen T-Rex? Dake frowned. From the name, it should be a subspecies of the T-Rex. This evolutionary path was wrong after all. While he was feeling regretful, he raised his head and looked at the earthen T-Rex that had become bigger and fiercer. From its appearance, the earthen T-Rex was stronger and sturdier than the T-Rex in his impression. It didn't have a wonderful roundness like the T-Rex. However, it also had the same appearance as the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Its head was covered with a hard shell like that of a beetle, and there were L-shaped horns on both sides of the shell. The part that extended to the tip of its nose had an unusually huge horn. Its sharp claws and teeth, and its horns were bigger than the T-Rex's. It was covered in blue stripes, and there were horns on both sides of its shoulders that the T-Rex didn't have. This made the earthen T-Rex look like a terrifying weapon, and it emitted a more violent and ferocious aura. It looks like it has more combat power than the T-Rex. Dake's eyes met the earthen T-Rex's, and he immediately felt the pride and contempt that were condensed in the T-Rex's bones. It was obvious that the earthen T-Rex's modesty before its evolution had been destroyed by Pride 3's effect. Most of the enchanted fairies were like this during their first evolution. However, from the second evolution onward, things would improve a lot. Dake was used to this. He clapped his hands and said calmly, "Earthen T-Rex, sit down." Therefore, the mighty and ferocious T-Rex, which was like a biological weapon, could only sit down obediently. When it felt the coolness of the ground, it seemed to be a little dazed and sat there like a large dinosaur toy. Dake, on the other hand, focused on the enchanted card. Curse Cage, Earthen T-Rex, was an orange card that emitted an orange glow. Card name, Earthen T-Rex. Type, Fairy card. Level, Race, Dragon. Attribute, Dragon/Fire. Magic power, 2800. Attack, 3000. Defense, 2500. Ultimate skills, Super Flame, Super Explosion, Giant Horn Attack, 6-star. It's a 6-star enchanted fairy. Dake immediately noticed the earthen T-Rex's star level. Since the little fiend beast, that evolved into a fiend beast, was only a 4-star, he was more inclined towards the sub-beast, that evolved into a great earth Tyrannosaurus, should be a 5-star magic guide fairy. However, the earthen Tyrannosaurus had obviously brought him more surprises. After the 9-tailed fox, he now had another 6-star enchanted fairy. The earthen T-Rex's race and attributes did not change. Its 3 attributes were very simple, and it was a standard 6-star enchanted fairy card. Its 3 ultimate skills were the same as its 3 attributes, and they were very standard offensive skills. Super Flame shoots out super hot flames from its mouth and burns everything. Super Explosion accumulates the super flame in its mouth and compresses it to the limit to obtain double the explosive power. The first compression takes 3 seconds, the second compression takes 10 seconds, and the third compression takes 30 seconds. The highest power can be increased by 3 times. Giant Horn Attack uses a giant horn to charge forward and pierce through the enemy in front of it. There was nothing difficult to understand. The only thing that needed to be tested was how much the super explosion's power would increase with every compression. If it increased by 50%, then it would be an extremely outstanding ultimate skill. If the ratio was not high enough, then the practicality of the skill would be greatly reduced. After all, in a battle where every second mattered, most of the time, it could only be compressed by one level. Compressing it by 3 levels would take 43 seconds, and it would be too late by then. Unfortunately, the current environment was not suitable to test the ultimate skills of a 6-star enchanted fairy. Other than Super Flame and Super Explosion, Earthen Tyrannosaurus' third Surekill skill was pretty decent. Other than being used to charge forward, the giant horn attack could also be used to increase one's speed. Although it was a little embarrassing to use an offensive ultimate skill to escape, it was better to lose face than to lose one's life. Dake patted the Earthen T-Rex's claws to show his satisfaction. Even though the Earthen T-Rex was only an orange card and did not have any special ultimate skills, its overall strength was enough to be considered outstanding among the 6-star enchanted fairy cards. One could not be too greedy. So next up, Dake looked around and said softly, "Lion Beast, hold the sword." The Lion Beast immediately stepped out, its scabbard following like a shadow. When it held the holy sword, its whole body's aura instantly improved. The Earthen T-Rex, who was sitting on the ground, suddenly turned its head and snorted fiercely at the Lion Beast. 2 wisps of flames came out of its nostrils. 5-star Lion Beast and 6-star Earthen Tyrannosaurus. Just when the 3 club members thought that Dark would let the Lion Beast and the Earthen Tyrannosaurus fight, Dark stopped the Earthen Tyrannosaurus from doing anything. He did not want to cause too much of a ruckus on the spiral clock tower. Even if the clock tower was as indestructible as the castle, it was not a reason to cause a ruckus here. If the club's score was deducted because of this, it would be more unjust than Do-E. After the enchanted fairy secretary finished scanning the records and the Lion Beast stood at the side with its sword, Dake said to the Earthen T-Rex, "Next, there's another experiment." The Earthen Tyrannosaurus immediately stood up. It could feel how powerful it had become after the successful evolution. If it was not restricted by its master's order, it would only need 3 seconds to kill the Hawkman who defeated it just now. And this was only the result of the second evolution. Each time it evolved, the power it obtained would increase exponentially. If the second evolution was already so powerful, what about the third? The thirst for power and the thirst for victory made the Earthen T-Rex's breathing quicken. So much so that it didn't even hear what its master said next. Stay true to your heart and remember who you are. This is a trial for you, and it might also be the first breakthrough in your life. Dark raised pride after he finished his words. But just as he was about to summon it, he suddenly paused and turned around. Luosi Sonic Bug. Luosi blinked and took out a magic elf card that she had refined during the holidays. Sonic Bug, a 3-star magic elf. She had summoned it during the Duel Club's recruitment competition. In addition to its own abilities, this magic elf could also work with the Mobius Worm's energy scale to recharge the Mobius Worm when it wasn't attacked. Apart from that, it also had a sure kill skill, Sound Absorbing Barrier. Luosi had once used Sound Absorbing Barrier to cut off the sound in a small area during a duel, so that the opponent's commands could not be transmitted to the magic elf's ears, creating a good opportunity to deal a fatal blow. A moment later, the Sonic Bug created a spherical sound-absorbing barrier around the empty space surrounding it. Dark nodded in satisfaction and raised pride again. Summon. Almost at the same time he began to retreat, making space for the Lion Beast. The lion, who had already understood, immediately unsheathed its sword and gathered its aura. The Earthen T-Rex was stimulated and immediately became alert. But pride's radiance had already scattered. The magic elves quietly walked out from various passages, all waiting solemnly. The little fiend flapped its wings and stared at the Earthen T-Rex. As a familiar, it always had a competitive mentality. Now that the Earthen T-Rex was so much stronger than the fiend it had evolved into, it felt jealous. Education could change people, but a leopard never changes its spots was no joke. It cursed the Earthen Tyrannosaurus in its heart. Fail, fail, fail. It was unknown if the little fiend's curse had come true. Under the light of pride, the Earthen Tyrannosaurus underwent a drastic change. It was more dangerous and faster than the little fiend's wrong evolution. The black light that symbolized evil and the golden light that symbolized light had an extremely intense conflict from the beginning. Later on, the golden light gained the upper hand, but the black light was not nibbled away. Instead, it went berserk like a broken jar. The earthen T-Rex let out a painful roar during the evolution process. The high decibel sound was isolated by the sound-absorbing barrier. It obviously did not remember Dake's words, and was swallowed by the darkness without warning. It did not need the guidance of other magic cards. There was also no spiritual power involved. It was as if this pride card was extremely compatible with it. The earthen T-Rex completed its wrong evolution at an extremely fast speed. That familiar, ferocious zombie Tyrannosaurus, which was only left with pale white bones, brought with it endless terror as it descended. Afterward, it was destroyed by the lion with 2 slashes. 7-star, the zombie T-Rex and the little fiend's evolution are exactly the same. Dake picked up the magic card. The sub-ancient beast in the curse cage had already returned to its original form. But it is more violent and harder to communicate with. 5 in 1 10,000 plus. Requesting votes, asterisk, O equals Omega, smiley face M. Chapter 559. Let's stop the experiment for now. Dake pressed his finger on the curse cage, sub-beast card and gently drew the magic circle. With the injection of magic, the sub-beast's state gradually recovered, and its dazed eyes brightened up again. Under normal circumstances, the enchanted elf would not be troubled by the abnormal state for a long time. Most of the abnormal statuses could be cleanly dispelled through unsummon, including the confusion of consciousness caused by the wrong evolution. After all, after unsummon, the sub-beast's evolution would also be removed. But what if he could not unsummon? Then he would just kill it. After death, the enchanted elf would naturally return to the enchanted elf card, and all the effects on the body would disappear. Evolution was no exception. It was because of this that Dake could calmly carry out the experiment related to evolution. Remember the website, MVIP can't you? 6-inch This incomplete pride card has a significant effect on the sub-beast. It's as if it exists specifically to evolve it into a zombie Tyrannosaurus. Unfortunately, the sub-beast's current state is still far from being able to maintain its consciousness after evolving into a zombie Tyrannosaurus. Dake continued to replenish the mana of the sub-beast as he pondered. His thoughts gradually became more active. After using this pride card, the sub-beast and the sub-beast can evolve into a zombie Tyrannosaurus. If I gather 3 zombie Tyrannosaurus, can they evolve into a zombie ultimate Tyrannosaurus? Ha ha ha. Dark laughed dryly as he destroyed this unrealistic fantasy of his. In short, the results of the experiment were within the acceptable range. If Curse Cage, sub-beast was used properly, it would become a well-deserved overlord in his deck. Also, the moment the lion beast swung its sword and killed the zombie Tyrannosaurus, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration and remembered something important that he had neglected these few days. Let's try again after the sub-beast recovers. Dake turned and walked to the classroom. Has the experiment ended? Deanna came over and asked. Not yet, Dake said. We'll do another round of experiments after the ancient beast recovers. What do you want to eat tonight? Deanna thought for a while and said, I don't know. I heard that there will be super sweet pineapple pie tonight, but everyone can only get one. Dake smiled and said, Then how about I give you my share? Deanna's eyes lit up. Great, great. The few of them returned to the classroom, and the magic elves followed them in. Right at this moment, a loud wailing sound suddenly rang out, instantly attracting everyone's attention. The multiform and Milk stopped in their tracks and rushed into the room. Everyone looked at each other in dismay before dispersing. Katrina followed beside him, but her eyebrows kept twitching. There were too many things in Dake's experiment that she didn't understand. She already found it hard to comprehend those highly intelligent magic elves that could stay in the guild for a long time, and the 3 consecutive evolutions of the Yaga beast had crushed her understanding. However, when she thought about it carefully, she seemed to have seen something similar during the Easter Duel Festival. It was just that this time, it was even more exaggerated and terrifying. It's only been less than half a year, right? Katrina couldn't help but shake her head. Time had passed, and everyone was improving. It was just that some people improved a little faster. It was time for her to continue reading. It wasn't until 7:11 p.m. after dinner that the spell cage, Yaga Beast, fully recovered. Dake stood up from his seat and returned to the open space between the 6 classrooms. Luosi and Deanna quickly followed him. Luosi summoned the sonic bug again and released the sound-absorbing barrier to isolate the sound. There were only 19 minutes left before the astrology class in the evening. The students who came to class had already climbed up the spiral clock tower one after another, probably because the 10th floor of the spiral clock tower had never been lit before. Most people would stop at this floor out of curiosity for a moment and observe curiously. Those who were more curious would directly knock on the door of the club classroom, which annoyed Katrina, who was reading seriously. Therefore, Dake paid more attention to the soundproofing when he was doing the second round of experiments. Come out, Yaga Beast. Since time was tight, he summoned the Yaga Beast again and took out the latest, Bliss 2 and Bliss 3. After more than an hour of adjustment, the Yaga Beast had regained its fighting spirit. The experience of evolving into a zombie Tyrannosaurus by mistake did not affect it too much. Bending but not breaking, tenacity and indomitable. These were the characteristics of a hero. Single scabbard. After Dake called out, the single scabbard flew over. Dake reached out his hand, and the single scabbard automatically transformed into its weapon form. Yaga Beast, test the sword. The Yaga Beast looked up at the holy sword that had just killed it not long ago, and its expression was filled with excitement. Only those who had personally experienced the power of the holy sword knew how powerful it was. It took a deep breath, reached out, and grabbed the hilt of the single scabbard with its claws. Then, it clenched its claws and held it tightly. Before the single scabbard was out of the scabbard, the sword began to vibrate violently. Although it had been walking around the same room as the Yaga Beast for the past few days, it was loyal and only attracted the Dilu Beast. It had never gotten close to the Yaga Beast. Today, it was the first time the 2 magic guide fairies had come into close contact. No, they had come into close contact with each other more than an hour ago. Anyway, the moment the Yaga Beast grabbed the hilt of the single scabbard, there was a resonance between the 2 magic guide fairies. It was a unique chemical reaction between a hero and a holy sword. The Yaga Beast seemed to have a stronger hero than the Dilu Beast. With this thought in mind, it suddenly pulled out its sword. When the holy sword came out of the scabbard, the holy aura hidden in the sword completely burst out. The pure white sword energy, like holy light on the sword's body, fluctuated. It didn't even need to be tested to know that the Yaga Beast would be able to fully activate combo slash and sword dance. The third hero. Dake couldn't help but take a deep breath. Although he had expected it, he still couldn't help but sigh at the reality. The Yaga Beast in Digimon. In his understanding, it was the embodiment of courage. It was the digital beast that fit the definition of hero. It would be better to say that the Lion Beast and the Dilu Beast also had hero, which was beyond his expectations. The Yaga Beast was the real orthodox one. The current situation also confirmed his judgment. The Yaga Beast's hero was most likely higher than the Dilu Beast. But how high was its hero's aptitude? Dake also couldn't measure it. But after confirming this judgment, Dake had another guess. If he could master the evolution path of Yaga Beast, Tyrannosaurus Beast, Mechanical Tyrannosaurus Beast, Battle Tyrannosaurus Beast, would it be able to further purify the hero after each evolution? This guess had no basis and couldn't be verified. But Dake did have this idea. But after 2 minutes, Dake put this idea aside and focused on the current experiment. He waved his hand and seized the scabbard under the reluctant gaze of the Yaga Beast. Then he directly activated Bliss 2. The pink light gradually scattered, and the moonlight was slightly tilted. The Bliss emblem appeared on the forehead of the Yaga Beast. Then the outline of its body, just like when it evolved into Yaga Beast S, expanded as it turned into a glowing body. But the difference was that the light on the Yaga Beast's body was completely absorbed at an extremely fast speed, revealing its pitch-black skin. Yaga Beast. Dake's eyes moved as he recognized the subspecies of the Yaga Beast. Darkness, night, moon. These were all elements of bliss. The Yaga beast in front of him had obviously absorbed the darkness element. Its entire body was emitting an extremely ferocious dark aura. It was a hero just a moment ago, but now it has been eroded by darkness. Dake couldn't help but think of the mad lion beast. He then tried to pass the scabbard to the Yaga beast. The Yaga beast immediately grabbed the scabbard. The holy aura in the scabbard was successfully activated, but the light immediately reversed and burned its palm. The Yaga beast immediately let out a low growl in pain, but its fingers that were holding the scabbard tightened. Its mana is decreasing. Dake injected mana into the magic card to quickly check the information. Card name, Yaga beast, type, elf card, level, *****, race, dragon attribute, dragon/dark, mana, 1100, attack, 1500, defense, 1300, ultimate skills, small flame Mach Rush, with the holy sword in hand. The Yaga beast's mana is continuously decreasing at a rate of 3 points per second. But in Paradise, this amount of mana consumption is negligible. In terms of attributes, the fire element has changed to the dark element. Its mana, attack, and defense are exactly the same as the Yaga beast S. But compared to the Yaga beast S, the Yaga beast S lacks the powerful small flame explosion, and has an additional physical ultimate skill called Mach Rush. Dake immediately looked at the details of the ultimate skill. Mach Rush burst forward with extreme speed in an instant, piercing the opponent with its sharp claws. It's a displacement and attack ultimate skill similar to the Giant Horn Rush. If used properly, it can be used to dodge or assassinate. The ultimate skill of the Digimon beast was very violent compared to the Pokémon. Dake asked the magician's secretary to record the details, then slowly pulled out the single scabbard from the Yaga beast's claws. Looking at the Yaga beast, baring its fangs to scare people like a teddy bear, he didn't know why, he suddenly laughed. Sorry, I didn't manage to hold it in, cough cough cough. Dake patted the Yaga beast's head and said seriously, "Have you forgotten what I told you?" The Yaga beast's expression froze, then slowly retracted its expression and the ferocity on its face gradually disappeared. Stay true to your heart, remember yourself. Don't be corrupted by darkness. Don't be devoured by chaos. The black in the Yaga beast's eyes gradually faded, and it successfully overcame the negative effects of Bliss 2. Even though it was a Digimon that was corrupted by the virus, Dake's Yaga beast didn't lose its righteous heart. This could be seen from the fact that it could successfully activate the Holy Sword. Then, let's continue with the next step of the experiment. Dake nodded satisfactorily and raised Bliss 3. If I'm not wrong, the next evolution should be a blue-black Tyrannosaurus. Yaga beast, Tyrannosaurus blue. Mechanical Tyrannosaurus blue. Dark battle Tyrannosaurus. This was an evolution path that even he knew about. The Tyrannosaurus and Mechanical Tyrannosaurus in this evolution path were both blue-black virus species. It could be said that they were two sides of the same coin as the vaccine Tyrannosaurus and Mechanical Tyrannosaurus. All in all, he was very satisfied with this evolution path, because the Dark Battle Tyrannosaurus was really cool. Under Bliss 3's radiance, the Yaga beast successfully evolved. Compared to the Great Earth Tyrannosaurus from before, the Tyrannosaurus blue and black Tyrannosaurus were closer to the Tyrannosaurus. Other than their blue-black skin, the two were almost identical. Card name, Black Tyrannosaurus. Type, elf card. Level, race dragon attribute, dragon/dark, magic power, 2400 attack, 2500 defense, 2300 ultimate skills, super flame, flame wall, flame horn. 5 stars? Maybe this is the normal evolution path. Dake looked at the 5 stars shining on the card and couldn't help but think to himself. Although he didn't know much about the Great Earth Tyrannosaurus, just from its appearance alone he could tell that the Great Earth Tyrannosaurus' combat power should be stronger than the Tyrannosaurus. Other than the different attributes, the Black Tyrannosaurus and the Tyrannosaurus' combat power should be about the same. In other words, the Great Earth Tyrannosaurus was abnormal. Using this as a basis, the Great Earth Tyrannosaurus' correct evolution path should be stronger than the mechanical Tyrannosaurus. The next evolution path should be stronger than the battle Tyrannosaurus. Was this deduction correct? Dake couldn't make up his mind. He turned his attention to the black Tyrannosaurus' ultimate skills. Other than the super flame, the black Tyrannosaurus also had 2 other fire-type ultimate skills. However, the black flames that it spat out were dark elemental skills as well. Among them, Wall of Flame was obviously a defensive sure-kill skill. Flame Wall. The black Tyrannosaurus uses flames to create a wall of fire to block the opponent's attacks. The third ultimate skill, Flame Horn, was also true to its name. Flame Horn, the black Tyrannosaurus, adds flames to its horns, causing additional fire elemental damage when it attacks with its horns. It's still a simple ultimate skill, but it's still useful. After Dake finished analyzing, he looked up at the black Tyrannosaurus that was still fighting with its own consciousness. Let's hope that the black Tyrannosaurus can sharpen its mind during the evolution of the black Tyrannosaurus. Eventually, it can rely on its own will to maintain a certain level of rationality after it evolves into a zombie Tyrannosaurus. Since class was about to start, Dake canceled the black Tyrannosaurus summon at 7:25 p.m. The moment the summon was canceled, the black Tyrannosaurus degenerated into a Sabegu. It shook its head in the magic card, trying to wake itself up as soon as possible. Bliss 3 had a huge effect on it, causing its consciousness to sink into darkness. It had to use all its strength to barely maintain its rationality. However, a true warrior was never afraid of difficulties. It wanted more training. Dake felt the Sabegu as consciousness and praised it. Well done. Keep up the good work tonight. Afterward, he released the Sabegu beast from the curse cage and turned it back into a familiar. The Sabegu moved its muscles and bones, and its eyes lit up. Are there more tonight? Dake nodded. Tonight is a feast for the gluttons. When there was only 1 minute left before class started, Dake Dimming walked into the astrology classroom from the back door. Beside him were Luo Si and Ibu. It was still the top of the spiral clock tower, and it was still the purple witch. Astrology was like a continuation of astronomy. Professor Midya Bartholomew arrived before the bell rang, which was rare. She did not drive the pumpkin carriage into the classroom like she did in the previous classes. However, she still followed her own habits and did not compromise with the academy. A pointed witch's hat that was casually placed on the desk. A purple veil that covered the tip of her nose. A black witch's robe that was tailored to fit her graceful figure. A dark purple net glove that reached her elbows. A pair of purple stockings that tightly wrapped around her slender legs. A pair of crystal high heels that were sharp enough to stab someone to death. Dake had always suspected that she had more than 2 sets of the same clothing. Even in the cold winter, Professor Midya would only put on a woolen coat. Her fingers nimbly twirled a slender wand, and her eyes, which were painted with lavender eyeshadow, slightly narrowed. Her gaze swept across everyone in the classroom. When Dake sat down with little Ibu, she stopped twirling her pen wand and knocked on the desk. The whispers in the classroom gradually stopped. At the same time, the bell for astrology class rang. When the bell stopped ringing, Professor Midya raised the corner of her mouth and said softly, "Can anyone stand up and introduce me? I don't want to mention those words this year." After saying that, her gaze lightly drifted to the audience. Astrology class was not unique. On Tuesday night, there was an astrology class that was taught by a senior professor. Most of the senior students chose the astrology class. As for those who chose this astrology class, apart from the second-year students that Professor Midya had brought along, there were only a few students who still wanted to learn astrology after being rejected by the astrology class. In other words, Professor Midya was their second-best choice. This did not mean that Professor Midya's ability was not good. It was just that the senior professor was more popular. However, Dake felt very lucky to be able to teach this class. Thus, when the other students felt awkward, he took the initiative to stand up and said with a smile, "Of course. The great guide of fate, the diviner of the eyes of the stars, the witch of the silver moon, the professor of astronomy last semester, Madam Midya Bartholomew. It is a pleasure to meet you again." It is also a pleasure to meet you, Dake Demung. Professor Midya winked at Dake and raised her wand again. She lightly tapped it and said, "Then please recite your name in your heart." Just as the students reacted, she suddenly extended her wand and tapped it. Immediately, above each student's head, flames lit up one after another. The flames danced happily and gradually turned into names. The students subconsciously raised their heads and could not help but let out a low cry. This kind of mysterious method of turning one's thoughts into flames and manifesting them was frightening. However, after calming down, most of the students began to look left and right, memorizing the names of the unfamiliar students. Naturally, Dake would not miss this opportunity. He looked around and quickly memorized the names. There were a total of 8 second-year students present. They were himself, Luo Siflati, Eudora Enway, Ai Ma Métis, Saraswati, Heidi Euphemia, Pitten Kellogg and Jimmy Abbott. Of the 9 stars chosen in the astronomy class, Luo Boat-Broheim was the only one who did not choose the astrology class. Regardless of whether it was correct or not, it was his choice. Apart from him, the other 8 stars were all present. Jimmy Abbott was an unremarkable student of the House of Fools. His final exam results were below average. Other than having a bit of talent in astrology, there was nothing outstanding about him on the surface. Because Dake did not have much contact with him, he took a few extra glances at him. Jimmy had short, dark gray hair, a watermelon hairstyle. The color of his skin was not very good, and there were many light freckles on his cheeks. He was tall and had an average build. Overall, it was hard to leave an impression on others. However, since he was a student of the astrology class, there were still many opportunities to interact with him. After Dake memorized his appearance, he looked at the students of the other grades. There were 3 third-year students, 2 fourth-year students, and 2 fifth-year students. Among the 7 students of the other grades, Dake only recognized one of them. The appearance of this person surprised him greatly. Betty Murray. She was a 5th-year student and belonged to the Marine Biology Research Department. Her skin was an eel. During the previous school year, she had formed an adventure team with White, Luo Boat, and Sea Keat to explore the secret passage. After that, they encountered the vampire Vlad and were in danger. Dake could more or less be considered her savior. Therefore, every time they bumped into each other, Betty would greet him very gently. Dake's impression of her improved. Betty wasn't very strong. She could barely be considered excellent in her studies. However, her talent and luck weren't very good. It wasn't strange that she was eliminated by the other, astrology class. However, since she was accepted by Professor Midya, she must have some talent in astrology. As for the other 5th-year student, the flame above his head showed the name, Antonio Cromwell. Dake felt that he looked familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen him before. However, although these 2 fifth-year students were from the same magic department, one of them was sitting on one side of the wall while the other was sitting on the other side of the wall. They were separated by an entire classroom. Is there a conflict between these 2 people? Dake's eyes gradually lit up. His heart for gossip was burning fiercely. After Professor Midya finished the roll call, she smiled and said, "Our class only has 15 students, so I won't say much. Before the class started, I made a small bet with Professor McDonald. I hope you can win this bet for me." Professor McDonald was the professor of the other astrology class. As soon as Professor Midya's voice fell, the 7 students who weren't second-year students started to move. Antonio Cromwell, who was a 5th-year student, immediately raised his hand. Professor Midya stretched out her hand and said, "Antonio Cromwell, what do you want to say?" Antonio's face slightly darkened. He immediately stood up and said, "Professor Bartholomew, we signed up for your elective class to learn astrology, not to become a gambling tool for you and Professor McDonald." Professor Midya raised her eyebrows slightly. Her red lips hidden behind the thin veil couldn't help but open and reveal a smile. She smiled and said, "Cromwell, learning and gambling don't conflict. This will be the assessment at the end of this semester. I sincerely hope that every one of my students can master astrology as soon as possible, faster than Professor McDonald's students. As the only student outside of the second year who directly chose my class, Don't you want to beat Professor McDonald, students? Or is it that you lack confidence in yourself? Antonio stared intently at Professor Midia's eyes. After 10 seconds, he was defeated and said in a deep voice, "No, I have confidence." Midia laughed and said, "That's right. You need to have confidence. No matter how capable a diviner is, the first thing you need is confidence. If you don't believe in your own divination, how can you make others believe in you? Sit down. You're the oldest student in the class. I hope you can be a role model for your juniors." "I will." Antonio sat down, but the dignified expression on his face didn't recede. Professor Midia's gaze immediately turned to the other students. With Antonio as an example, the other students no longer had any doubts about the bet. But other than that, they clearly lacked confidence. Obviously, they didn't have much hope in beating Professor McDonald's students. After all, except for Antonio, the other 6 people were all in the failure group that Professor McDonald eliminated. In contrast, the second-year students didn't have much doubt about this. Aima raised her hand and said, "Professor, since the assessment is tied to the bet, then if we fail the bet, can we still pass this elective class this year?" It was a very practical question. Professor Midia nodded and said, "Of course, you can't pass." The sound of discussion below the stage suddenly increased. Sarah raised her hand and said, "Professor, then what exactly is the bet?" Professor Midia narrowed her eyes and said, "It's a very simple bet. Professor McDonald and I will teach you astrology in the first semester of this academic year. Then, during the end-of-semester assessment, we will divine some things that will happen in the next semester. Whichever side's divination is more accurate wins. If the divination fails, it means that you haven't mastered astrology. If you haven't mastered astrology, it means that you can't pass the assessment." This was a very simple principle. After listening to Professor Midia's explanation, the students quieted down. The elective class was chosen by themselves. Since he had chosen astrology, it meant that he wanted to learn astrology. If you can't learn it, what's the point of letting you pass? Therefore, among the 15 students, only Dake Dimming was dumbfounded. He didn't know anything about his own talent in divination. The reason he chose astrology was to accompany Ivan. Although Ivan had made up for his basic knowledge during the holidays, his level of magical engineering and magic theory was still very low. To let him master astrology in half a semester, it would be better to let him study maximization on his own. It was impossible anyway. I wonder if the assessment will be a class assessment or an individual assessment. If it's a group assessment, I can still freeload. Dake couldn't help but humbly think to himself. Unlike astronomy, the professor of astrology was very professional from the very beginning. Professor Midia didn't laugh and joke around. She started from the most basic astrology theory in detail. The so-called astrology, generally speaking, was to see the future from the trajectory of the stars. But if one were to break it down, there would be different central celestial bodies, different methods of observation, and so on. There were countless different types of astrology. Among them, there were 2 big categories. They were star divination and constellation divination. Star divination used the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, Venus as the central celestial body for divination. Constellation divination used the 88 constellations as the main divination method. According to Professor Midia's explanation, in this semester, as long as one could master one of the subcategories of astrology, it would be considered a success. Star divination with the Sun or the Moon as the central celestial body, or constellation divination with the 12 signs of the zodiac as the object of observation, are all relatively easy to master divination methods. My personal suggestion is that star divination with the Moon as the central celestial body is the easiest to learn. Of course, everyone's preferences are different. As for the specifics, you will have to rely on yourself to grasp. Tonight's class ends here. When you go back, I hope you can quickly memorize the knowledge taught tonight. Also, don't forget to hand in your homework to the grade leaders before Wednesday night. Class dismissed. After announcing the end of the class, Midia left the classroom in her high heels. The familiar pumpkin carriage was already parked in front of the door. She boarded the carriage. The two dark beasts pulling the carriage moved their limbs and soared into the sky. However, after she left, the atmosphere in the classroom did not relax. All 15 students were quickly copying the notes left on the blackboard. After they finished copying, they began to think with rapt attention, trying to digest the knowledge taught by Professor Midya in class. She had talked about so many things that 1.5 hours of teaching time was not enough at all. Even if she did not give them homework, they still needed a lot of time to digest and absorb the knowledge taught in class. This was the first time the second-year students came into contact with Professor Midya. Two of them could not help but ask their second-year juniors, "Is Professor Bartholomew always this serious?" The second-year students could only laugh dryly and say, "Yes." They could not tarnish Professor Midya's image in front of their seniors. If Professor Midya found out, wouldn't they be done for? But in any case, the learning atmosphere in this astrology class was obviously stronger than in the major class. Those senior students who still chose Professor Midya's astrology class after being rejected by Professor MacDonald naturally had a positive attitude of wanting to learn astrology. And under their leadership, the second-year students couldn't relax. Therefore, it was not until half an hour after the class ended that the students in the classroom left one after another. Dake stayed until the end. He took the blackboard eraser from Eudora, who was standing on tiptoe to wipe the blackboard, and wiped the top of the blackboard clean. "Thank you." Eudora's face turned red again. "It's nothing." Dake put down the blackboard eraser and asked, "Next, do we go back directly?" Seeing Eudora's hesitant look, Dake smiled and said, "Then come to our club for a while, and then go back with us?" Eudora immediately nodded and said, "Okay." Luosi, who had just packed up her things, walked over, took her arm and said, "Then let's go together. I made tea. Although I don't know if you are used to iced tea." The three left the classroom, turned off the lights, and went down from the 12th floor to the 10th floor. The lights in the Magical Animals Club's classroom were still on, but Senior Katrina had already left. Only the magic guide elves were reading and resting in the classroom. After seeing Dake come back, the sub-beast immediately handed over the Ubuharo in its arms to the variegated monster. Eudora's eyes were completely attracted by the magical animal that was obviously not a magic guide elf. She was about to ask Dake, but Luosi had already said, "That is the Ubuharo, our club's first magical animal." After Dake put down his school bag, he led the sub-beast to the open space between the 6 classrooms. Luosi's sonic bug also flew over and activated sound-absorbing barrier. Dake took out Greed 2 and Greed 3 from the card pack and said to the sub-beast, "Is it too difficult to familiarize yourself with 3 evolutions in one day?" The sub-beast's eyes were firm. It shook its head and said, "I can feel it very clearly every time I evolve. There are great differences between them. I won't confuse them." "That's good," Dake said with relief. "Get ready for the 3rd round of experiments. Let's start with Greed 2. When the sub-beast nodded, Dake activated Greed 2. Swipe card evolve. The sub-ancient beast began to evolve under the purplish-blue radiance. With the flash of the light of evolution, the cold aura dispelled the last trace of heat in the night. The sub-beast that was as white as snow appeared from the light. What subspecies is it this time? Dake couldn't help narrowing his eyes. Before tonight, he had never thought that there would be so many subspecies of the sub-beast. This feeling was like watching Ibu's evolution. It was very novel every time. He then looked at the Curse Cage Sub-Beast magic card and found that the name on the card had changed to Curse Cage Sub-Beast. Sub-Beast was a subspecies that lived in the snowfield. Its body was the same color as the snow, and it could hide in the snow and approach enemies without being discovered. When it snows, they will always be noisy and play around like children. Card name, Sub-Beast type, Elf card, level, *****, race, dragon attribute, dragon/ice, magic power, 1100, attack, 1500, defense, 1300, ultimate skill, mini blizzard white snow hailstorm. The change in attribute will lead to a change in the ultimate skill. Other than that, it's no different from Sub-Beast S and Sub-Beast S. Then let's check the ultimate skill first. Dake injected more magic power, and soon got a response. Mini Blizzard. The ancient Shueya beast can spit out a mini blizzard that can freeze its opponent. White Snow Hailstorm. Subbeast Snow Hailstorm can condense ice energy into a ball and shoot it into the air to form an icicle to smash the enemy. Two ultimate skills that are very compatible with the ice attribute. Mini Blizzard can be used as a control skill, and White Snow Hailstorm can be used as an attack skill. In short, it's not bad when it's a 3-star magic elf. Next, I'm curious about the next stage of evolution of the Subbeast. Dake first ordered the Subbeast to release its ultimate skill into the air. After carefully observing and recording it, he then picked up Greed 3. Ancient Snow Beast immediately turned around and welcomed the radiance of Greed 3. In the name of Dake Dimung, I summon you. The strong light of greed dyed the 6 walls a deep purplish blue. The ancient snow beast felt even more desire. Not only did it thirst for power, but it also thirsted for snow and knowledge. Among all of Dake's magic elves, it was the only one that was summoned after entering the school. Apart from it, all of the other magic elves had learned how to read and write. Every time it saw its companions reading and writing, although it was confused, it was secretly envious. This envy was further strengthened under the guidance of Greed 3, and turned into a greed for knowledge. When the light of evolution that enveloped its body converged inward, a snow-white demon-shaped digital beast appeared in front of Dake. It wore a pointy round hat and a snow-white cloak. It held an ice crystal staff in its hand as if it was a magician that controlled ice and snow, emitting a cold and wise aura. 5 and 1 10,000 plus, 192/233. Deadline got it. I'm finally done, please vote. Chapter 560. Could this be a wizard beast? Looking at the ancient snow beast that evolved into a digital beast, Dake suddenly recalled a memory of the first Digimon. In the first Digimon, the wizard beast appeared as the partner of the Diru beast. Later on, in order to protect one of the protagonists, Gale and the Diru beast, it sacrificed itself to block the attack of the boss, the vampire beast. As a result, the Diru beast evolved into a fairy beast. Tears and sadness were always unforgettable. Dake subconsciously turned his head to look for the Diru beast. However, unlike the day, the Diru beast did not come to look at him. As for the snow-white humanoid digital beast in front of him, it was not a wizard beast. It was a subspecies of the wizard beast, the ice wizard beast. In the setting of the anime, the ice wizard beast was the same as the wizard beast. They were wizards that came from the digital world, Witcherny. They used masks to cover their faces and never showed their real faces. They mastered magic of different attributes and were all highly intelligent digital beasts that could evolve into sage beasts. In other words, they were born as mages. Remember, https://m, Vipcanshu. VIP as a dragon species, the ancient snow beast was able to evolve into a humanoid ice sorcerer beast. That was indeed unexpected. However, this was the charm of the digital beast. When Dake completed the evolution, he had already injected magic into the magic card and finally received feedback. Card name, Ice Wizard Beast, type, Fairy card, level, race, human attribute, Ice/Light, magic, 3000, attack, 2300, defense, 1600, ultimate skill, Ice Crystal Cloud, Aquarius Fill, Ice Phantom, a 5-star magic fairy. The star level of the Ice Wizard Beast was not unexpected. It was the same 5-star as the Black Tyrannosaurus Beast. However, in the distribution of 3 sizes, the Ice Wizard Beast and the Black Tyrannosaurus Beast had a huge difference. The Ice Sorcerer Beast's mana had surpassed the pinnacle of 5 stars and even reached the pinnacle of 6 stars. Its attack was not weak either, but its defense was only 1,600 points. Obviously, it belonged to the type of mage with high HP and high magic. After evolving into an ice wizard beast, its race changed from a dragon to a human, and its attributes were ice and light? After a brief moment of shock, Dake looked at his sure kill skill pane. The ice sorcerer beast also had 3 sure kill skills, and each sure kill skill had a different effect. It could be said that it was very comprehensive. Ice Crystal Cloud. The Ice Sorcerer Beast has mastered the magic of controlling ice. Using an ice crystal staff with snowflakes attached to it, it can summon a snow cloud and trigger an intense snowstorm. Aquarius refill. The ice sorcerer beast has mastered the magic of controlling light. Through prayer, it can summon holy power to heal wounds and recover the target's life force, magic power. Every 100 points of mana consumed would restore 10% of his HP. At most, he could consume 1000 points of mana to restore 100% of his HP. Cooldown, 15 minutes. Ice illusion. The ice sorcerer beast has mastered the magic of controlling ice and light. It can cause the target to hallucinate and be bound by cold and nightmares. It's an ice element AoE spell. A light healing spell. It's an ice and light dual elemental mind control spell. Attack healing control. As expected of a sorcerer, who can control ice and light. Dake squinted his eyes and analyzed carefully. The information repeatedly mentioned that the ice sorcerer beast has mastered the magic of controlling ice and light. Does this mean that this is a passive effect of the Sure Kill skill? It has extraordinary talent in ice and light magic? Or, Dake said to the ice sorcerer beast, Ice sorcerer beast, perform your magic. Okay. The ice sorcerer beast replied very clearly and raised the staff in its hand. In an instant, the ice and light elements mixed together to form an icy blue stream of light that was released from the staff. The ice sorcerer beast gently waved the staff, and the stream of light flew into the sky and spread out to form a shining galaxy. It continued to pour in mana, and the galaxy became wider and longer. This was not one of the 3 Sure Kill skills, but a pure elemental control spell. Dark's eyes were filled with shock. He had spent a lot of effort just to let the magic guide fairies learn how to sense and use mana. However, this ice sorcerer beast was born with the ability to control mana, just like the Basti beast. It was enviable. If I let the sub-beast remember a few light and ice spells, and let it evolve into an ice sorcerer beast, would it be able to cast spells on the spot? Dake could not help but have such thoughts in his mind. It was a pity that he only knew about the Dark Spirit spell and the Soulless Curse, and could not verify it on the spot. However, the discovery in front of him was enough to make him excited. The 3 Sure Kill skills of the Ice Sorcerer Beast were very useful, especially the second Sure Kill skill, Aquarius Refill, which was a very powerful healing skill. However, Dake wanted to know how talented the Ice Sorcerer Beast was, or how high its IQ was. Dake Dimming had always been good at taking action. He directly brought the ice sorcerer beast into the classroom, and then picked up a textbook called Mathematics I. He flipped it to the page of the multiplication table, and showed it to the ice sorcerer beast. Memorize it. The ice sorcerer beast looked at it and frowned. Multiplication, what is it? Dake paused for a moment, and then quickly explained it to the ice sorcerer beast. After learning the definition of multiplication, the ice sorcerer beast only took 2 minutes to memorize the multiplication table. It had a photographic memory. Moreover, its learning ability was different from the magician's secretary. Scanning ability. It could truly memorize and understand. Dake turned to the exercise page after class, and the ice sorcerer beast easily solved all the arithmetic. Luosi and Eudora, who were watching from the side, couldn't help but cover their mouths. They had all suffered from mathematics, and they were even in the abyss now. Therefore, after seeing that this magic elf could master the basic calculations so easily, they couldn't help but feel a little jealous. Is this still a magic elf? Eudora finally couldn't help but exclaim. The ice sorcerer beast turned to look at her, but it said very calmly, yes. Eudora was suddenly stunned. Dake blinked, but it excitedly took out a reading and writing textbook, turned to the page of the reading table, and immediately handed it to the ice sorcerer beast. I'll read it once and you memorize it. The ice sorcerer beast turned back. It looked cold, but there was a flame in its eyes. Dake quickly taught the reading table. Then, it only took 3 to 4 minutes for the ice sorcerer beast to completely memorize the reading table. After a few more minutes, the 15-minute evolution time was up, and the ice sorcerer beast suddenly degenerated back to the subancient beast. The subancient beast, which had returned to its original form, had a silly look on its face. It had completely lost the wisdom of the ice sorcerer beast. But theoretically speaking, It and the ice sorcerer beast were the same entity. Even if their personalities and IQ were different, their memory was exactly the same. In other words, the subancient beast should have also memorized the multiplication table and reading table. It was simply cheating to complete the memorization in this way. In order to verify, Dake immediately asked the subancient beast to recite it. The subancient beast opened its mouth and actually recited it completely. But Dake immediately asked it to do the exercises again. As soon as it did this, it made a problem. It seems that memorizing and doing are indeed two different things. Dake sighed and comforted the subancient beast. In the exercises just now, the subancient beast made two mistakes. Basically, as long as the calculation was a little complicated, it couldn't do it. This situation was like not getting full marks in an open book math exam. The theorems and formulas were all there, but it just couldn't do it. The subancient beast racked its brains and frowned. Dake quickly calmed down and then became happy again. Just being able to help you memorize is already a very amazing plugin. From tonight onwards, I'll let the lion beast start teaching you the basics. I believe you can do it. The subancient beast couldn't help but open its mouth and couldn't close it for a long time. But it had to ask if it could do it. Of course, it couldn't say no. When the subancient beast patted its chest and said that it would definitely master the basics as soon as possible, Dake put away the magic card and then walked to the subancient bird's room to play with it for a while before leaving the club classroom. The astrology class ended at 9 p.m. sharp, but it was already 9:30 p.m. when Dake came down. Now it was already past 10 p.m. I wonder if Nora is locked outside? Thinking of this, Dake called Luosi and Eudora and left the club classroom with a bunch of magic elves. How is it, our club classroom? Dake asked on the way. Eudora let out a heartfelt sigh. Big. How could it not be big? The entire 10th floor of the spiral clock tower belonged to the Magical Zoology Club. Compared with those clubs located in the castle, of course, it was ridiculously big. However, the astrology club that Eudora belonged to was also quite special. In addition to their own club classroom, they also had the right to use the observatory. On the top floor of the aristocrat courtyard tower was the observatory. Although Dake hadn't visited the other towers, he estimated that the top floor of the other three towers should also be the observatory. The observatory had telescopes that could be used to observe the starry sky. If they wanted to master astrology as soon as possible, they had to make full use of this observatory. The three of them entered the tower of the House of Nobles with a group of magical pets. At this time, there were not many people left in the common lounge. Most of them were used to the daily comings and goings of the magical elves. They only glanced at them and continued to read. Good night. Good night. Good night. After the three of them said good night to each other, they separated at the stairs of the 3rd floor. Dake slowed down. When he was only a few meters away from dorm 301, he found a cute puppy lying at the door. This puppy was snow white with only a tuft of red hair on its forehead. It was Aurora's familiar, Icefire Hound. When Dake found the Icefire Hound, the Icefire Hound also found him. The cute puppy immediately got up, jumped and pounced at Dake, and accurately got into his arms. Woof! The Icefire Hound barked, then lay on Dake's chest and licked up desperately. Its short and small tail was swinging like a propeller. Dake squatted down and fixed it with his left hand. His right hand stroked from the top of its head to its tailbone in a straight line. After repeating several times, he heard a soft woof woof. Then he put the Icefire Hound on the ground and said, "Go complete your mission." The Icefire Hound shook its head and became spirited again. Not bad. Dake looked at the Icefire Hound running downstairs and couldn't help but smile. Me. Oh Omega. Afterwards, his arm was tightly bound by Fairy Ibu's ribbon. When Aurora, who had been informed by her familiar, came in with supper, Dake had already put away his bag and sat down in front of the desk. The 2 elective classes had been completed, and he had 3 days of rest. In these 3 days, apart from completing homework and watching the newbie competition on Saturday morning, he would further remodel the club's classroom, and buy items according to the wishes of each Magic Guide sprite. For example, the various training equipment for the Horned Hawkmen. In addition, he planned to make a trip to Traveler's Street. He would first go to the Kitty Flower Shop, and then go to the Universal Duel Club, as Academy branch, to take a look. The Shengmalian Academy's efficiency was very high. The trial run cards and first-generation duel discs had already been mass-produced and could be sold in limited quantities within the Academy. Although the small mages within the Academy weren't the main customers of the Universal Duel Club, their ability to accept new things was higher, and the speed at which they grasped the rules of the card duel was also faster. From them, one could see the competition between the duel game and magic chess more quickly and intuitively. Up until now, Dake and the others' estimates of the duel game's sales were based on speculation without any actual data. Whether or not the duel game could be developed into an industry that could compete with magic chess still needed to be verified by actual data. Only with better test results could the first phase of the official sale begin. Dake and the Magic Guide sprites happily enjoyed the supper that Aurora had personally made, and told her about the interesting things that had happened today. Aurora also picked out a few things that had happened in the first years and told him. Among them, it naturally included the premeditated plan of the first years. Dake had already known the reaction of the first years on Tuesday night after the math class ended. Other than Victoria and Phoenix, there were also Vivian and Angie who came to complain about him. Dark Elf Vivian Alvind, the one who had caused the explosion. Her relationship with Dake was only mutual acquaintance. If Dake hadn't taken over the position of assistant in the math class, he would have only looked after her a few times for the sake of Oscar Aud. But now the position of assistant had become the intersection point between the two of them. Vivian bumped into Dake on the way back from the cafeteria. After a simple greeting, she mentioned that the first years were up to no good. Whether she said it casually or deliberately, Dake appreciated her kind intentions. What really made him laugh was Enchi's complaint. The third princess had specially found him and eloquently recounted the reactions of every student after the math class. She had also pushed all the blame to the second princess, Anna. This was the first time she had come to Dake after entering the academy. Her words and actions were not unfamiliar at all, and she even had a look of "this princess will protect you." If Dake hadn't had enough spies in the first years, she would have fooled him. That night, Dake learned the complete story from Aurora. After the first years were successfully fanned by the two princesses, they quickly discussed how to deal with Dake, the new assistant. After the ferment of the day, the people involved in the incident gradually settled down, and their strategy was also close to being finalized. That's it. After listening to Aurora's story, Dake couldn't help but be surprised. He originally thought that in this magical world, even if it was a prank, it would be combined with magic to create a different kind of prank. But the strategy that the first years came up with was so simple that it made one's heart ache. First, it was a classic prank. They placed a blackboard eraser above the front door. Once someone pushed the door open from the front door, the blackboard eraser covered in chalk dust would fall from the top and hit the person's head. In order to calibrate, the first years also prepared to add some tricks to the blackboard eraser. Once the assistant who entered the door was hit by the blackboard eraser that fell from the sky, his anger would surge, and he would ignore the front door. And the floor from the classroom door to the lectern would be coated with a special agent that eliminated friction. However, anyone who stepped on it would fall hard if they were distracted for even a moment. At that time, the mechanism they had installed on the ceiling would react and spray water down. The water that was sprayed out would naturally be clean, but the assistant's head would be covered in chalk dust. After the chalk dust and water were mixed, it would create an extremely disgusting mixture. At that time, the assistant who was in a mess would be burning with anger. In order to get up as quickly as possible, he would grab the lectern. The lectern was covered with glue that would stay sticky for an hour. Once everyone was hit, the pitiful assistant would have to stand on the lectern in a sorry state for almost an hour. Although this public execution wouldn't cause much harm, it would be extremely humiliating. Of course, the premise was that everyone was hit. With such a simple prank, even if Dake didn't know about it beforehand, he didn't think that he would fall for it. In fact, the blackboard eraser couldn't hit him at the beginning. The subsequent tricks couldn't make him fall at all. Dake Dimung was someone who had opened 3 chakras. In terms of reaction speed and stability, He was better than ordinary people. Those first-year students set a trap for ordinary people, so naturally, they wouldn't succeed. Once the prank failed. No, even if it succeeded, it would still be the same. As the assistant mathematics teacher, Dake would definitely investigate the people behind this and hold them accountable. Pranking him would only make them feel good for a while. In the end, no matter what, they would suffer a backlash. They probably thought that with the two princesses on their side, even if they were punished, it wouldn't be too serious. But they didn't know that one of the two princesses had already defected. Dark suddenly asked as he ate the delicacies. "When do you think Anna will come and tell on us?" Aurora was not surprised at all as she replied, "It should be in the next day or two." Dake smiled and said, "Anna always thinks more than Chi, so some of her actions are slower. At first glance, it seems like they're targeting me, but in fact, it's a scheme between them." As always, he was mischievous. Aurora curiously asked, "Then when it's Tuesday, what are we going to do?" Dake shook his head and said, "There's no Tuesday." The next day, Friday, Dake completed all of his homework except for the duel class according to the plan. Then he went to Traveler's Street at noon. The original strategy for the duel game card sales was to put the cards in the model Easter egg and sell them together. However, if they did this in the early stages of the testing, the cost of acquiring the cards would be too high. Therefore, after the school and Claire reached an agreement, they would sell the first set of basic cards together with the duel disc. Then they would sell the advanced cards separately. After the cards were officially released, they would be linked with the model Easter egg. Besides, in order to attract customers, the Nationwide Duel Club also held an opening promotion. Not only was there a limited time discount, but there was also a lucky draw. Dake arrived at the shop before the promotion started. However, he didn't interfere with the business, and only sat inside to observe. Perhaps due to the photocopies sold by the shop last week being trendy and useful, the Nationwide Duel Club had built a good reputation. After a week of fermenting, many students came to visit the shop when Traveler's Street opened. Then, their gazes were naturally attracted to the gorgeous duel disc. The duel disc that was placed neatly on the shelves was silver white and exceptionally eye-catching. The students couldn't help but ask. But after Eve and Aaron's introduction, most of the students lost their interest. Even with the discount, the duel disc wasn't cheap. Moreover, this was only a toy used in the duel simulation, which was nothing more than a waste of credits in the eyes of most people. Moreover, if one wanted a duel, one could just sign up for the competition. Why would one use such a toy for the simulation? Therefore, the first duel disc was only sent out after someone won the lucky draw. Seeing that the duel disc couldn't be sold at all, Eve and Aaron looked rather anxious. The beginning is always the hardest. However, Dake wasn't in a hurry. The main audience of the duel game in the academy should be the first-year students who couldn't participate in the competition. However, the first-year students couldn't enter Traveler's Street until the Friday afternoon of the fourth week of school. There were still 2 weeks left. Before that, if the duel disc could be sent out through the lucky draw and the winners would be interested in playing along, it would be considered a success. The duel simulation itself was the best publicity for the duel game. As long as 2 people had a duel in the common lounge, the light and shadow effects created by the duel disc were enough to capture the attention of the onlookers. In comparison, the magic chess that could only be played on the chessboard paled in comparison. Dake stayed in the shop for the entire afternoon and sent out a total of 18 duel discs. On the other hand, the number of discs sold was only 1. This was because the buyer's friend won a duel disc and the buyer bought it for the sake of playing with his friend. At least it's open for business, isn't it? Dake patted Aaron's shoulder and left the shop. A total of 19 duel discs were sent to the academy. If the market performance of the duel simulation was good enough, this number would be enough to ferment. If the market performance wasn't good enough, there wouldn't be much value in investing in this project. But what he didn't expect was that in less than 2 minutes after he left, 2 customers entered the shop. Not only did they buy a duel disc each, but they also bought plenty of card packs. The appearance of these 2 customers made Eve and Aaron heave a sigh of relief. Perhaps this duel simulation was just a dispensable project to Dake. However, It was extremely important to the sisters. If the dual simulation project was cancelled due to the failure of the market test, they would lose their reason to stay in the academy. The appearance of the two clients really gave them peace of mind. By the way, what are their names? Take down their names for market research, Eve asked. After pondering for a while, Aaron said, "Let me think. They call each other White and Luoboat." Oh. White and Luoboat pinned the silver whitish dual disc on their arms and flaunted it to each other. Originally, the two of them came to Traveler's Street to replenish their magic chess pieces. However, when they saw someone holding a cool silver toy on the way, they followed that person's path and found the Universal Duel Club. The reputation of the Ultimate Duel Club had spread throughout the castle. They knew that this was a shop that sold photocopies. But they weren't interested in the photocopies, which was why they entered the shop and inquired about the origin of the silver whitish toy. After careful questioning, White keenly sensed that this toy was essentially the same as the magic chess pieces, which piqued his interest. Due to the changes in the curriculum, the second-year students had more free time before the official activities began. White and Luoboat were bored, so they decided to buy the dual disc. I saw the rules of this duel game. It's no different from an official duel. Otherwise, why would it be called a duel simulation? The two of them fiddled with the dual disc as they walked toward the pavilion in the middle of the lake. White said, "You will be participating in the newbie competition tomorrow morning. Perhaps we can use this dual disc to practice?" Luoboat's eyes lit up. "Isn't this what Dake always said? Combining entertainment and learning. What's it called again?" White. Education and entertainment. 3. 5 and 1 7,000 plus. Today's full attendance is just right. Please vote Heartsuit. Chapter 561. The duo quickly entered the common room in the Knights Academy Tower. Justin Wayne, the leader of the second-grade Knights Academy, hurriedly got up and jogged over when he saw them, yelling, "I finally found you guys. Where's the magical language homework Professor Bode gave us?" "Don't worry, of course we've already finished it." Luoboat waved the dual disc in his hand and said proudly. Justin's expression changed subconsciously. "Finishing homework on time isn't something to be proud of, Luoboat. You should know that this is just my duty as a student." Luoboat hurriedly waved his hand. "That's enough, Justin. You've become more and more long-winded ever since you became a leader." Justin defended himself. "I'm doing this for your own good." Luoboat wanted to continue talking back, but White hurriedly pulled him back. "Justin, wait a moment. We'll bring the homework down." After that, he pulled Luoboat up to the third floor. After a while, the duo finally handed over the homework to Justin. Justin let out a sigh of relief and muttered, "I don't want to face Professor Bode with incomplete homework." Go. White grabbed him by the shoulders and pushed him away. When he was out of the door, she suddenly turned around and smiled at Luoboat. The first website was https://m. Vipcanchu. VIP. Then the duo raised the dual disc in unison. Although the dual disc had a slot for a charging card, for the little mages with magic, they only needed to inject a small amount of magic to activate it. The duo mixed up the cards they had just bought, and put them into the dual disc from the side. Then they activated the dual disc and shuffled the cards automatically. The whole process was basically the same as the duel on the contestant stage. First, the cards were shuffled, then the cards were drawn. After the dual disc was activated, it would automatically identify the opponent and connect with them. Duelists, please create a title. Just as the two were excitedly trying out the dual disc for the first time, the dual disc issued a monotonous voice reminder. White and Luoboat looked at each other and spoke at the same time. Disembark Knight's Sword. Landing Iron Fist Fighter. Connection successful. Knight's Sword versus Iron Fist Fighter. Almost at the same time, heavy and thick iron chains appeared under the feet of both sides. They extended forward along both sides and instantly connected. Crack. The site was connected. Begin. A dignified voice sounded from the silver-white dual plate. Flaming frames appeared on both ends of the arena, and numbers were jumping within the frames. The two of them who had read the rule book naturally knew that this was the number that represented health. The simulated duel was limited by the cost of the duel disk, so the rules of the duel were greatly simplified. First, he removed the magic conducting ball. Then, the magic conducting spirits summoned from each card could only attack once in a round. The enchanted fairy didn't have magic power, it only had attack and defense. If the damage received exceeded the defense value, the magic guide fairy would be killed. The duelist would only be directly attacked if all of the summoned magic spirits were killed. Of course, these were only the basic rules. There were always special card effects that could break the rules. In short, it simplified the controls that the duelist needed to make, but added a bit of strategy. Not only archmages, but even ordinary people without magic power could find joy in it. But in comparison, the most attractive part of the initial stage of the simulated duel was that the projection of a human magic guide fairy could be summoned at will. Normal summon Ibu. Following White's shout, a lifelike little Ibu appeared in the air. He immediately said excitedly, "Luoboat, look at what I summoned. Damn, it's actually Dake's fantasy beast." Luoboat looked at his cards and said, "White, although Dake's Ibu is very powerful, it can only be used in his hands. Your Ibu card should only be 1 star, right? My turn, I usually summon a troll." A 3-star ugly troll suddenly appeared on Luoboat's field. It's actually a troll. White couldn't help but open his eyes wide. Troll attack. Luoboat suddenly shouted. The sudden appearance of the troll's projection and Luoboat's excited shout immediately attracted everyone's attention. Under everyone's gaze, the troll's projection let out an extremely intimidating sound effect. And then a white light shot out from its mouth. Seeing that the 1-star Ibu was about to be killed by the troll, White immediately flipped her card. Use the magic card, Counterattack Shield. The magic card, Counterattack Shield, was an extremely difficult card to refine. It took 2 years to refine, but there wasn't even a chance to touch it. But White had pulled out this extremely rare and expensive card from the card pack she had purchased. An inwardly revolving wall of light appeared in front of Ibu, and the troll's attack was instantly repelled and shattered. White gave the order to attack Ibu and his newly summoned magic guide fairy on the next turn. The simulated duel between White and Luoboat caused a huge uproar in the common lounge of the Knights Institute Tower. At the same time, the other people who had received the duel disc also began to ponder and try it out. Even the common lounge of the Aristocrats Institute had people trying it out. Dake keenly sensed that a gust of wind had begun to blow. When he returned from the club classroom, he discovered that there were upperclassmen in the common lounge of the Aristocrats Institute Tower, using the duel disc to simulate a duel. Both sides of the duel had solemn expressions and were abnormally serious. More and more spectators gathered, and almost everyone in the common lounge had gathered around. Everyone's eyes were filled with novelty, and they were quite interested in the simulated duel. I hope it's not a temporary fad. Dake crossed his arms and stayed in the common lounge for a while, feeling a bit happy. He had spent an entire afternoon in the store, but he had only sold a single duel disc. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't sullen. Although the Duel Society of the Whole People was founded by Claire Carter, he had participated in all the planning and considered it a kind of venture. If the middle of the road collapsed before he even started his business, he would also feel disappointed. However, the situation had clearly taken a turn for the better. If this popularity could continue for a while, the initial testing would be a success. Although the follow-up maintenance would still be heavy, it would be a good start. Once the simulated duel became popular among the commoners, the Duel Society of the Whole People might even be able to start a competition for simulated duels and introduce a profession system. It would exist as a companion industry for magic duels. At that time, not only would it be able to stimulate consumption, but it would also create jobs and improve the people's livelihood, making a great contribution to the kingdom's economic development. That night, Dake spent most of his time in the common lounge, investigating and analyzing the advantages and disadvantages of the simulated duel so that he could implement improvements in the future. He only returned to the dormitory with the magic engineering elves after a day of study had ended, and they had returned from the club classroom. Not long after, An uninvited guest arrived at the dormitory, second Princess Anna. Just as Dake had guessed, Anna had also come to snitch. Dake didn't want to waste too much time on this matter. He ordered Anna to make a list of all the first-year students who were involved in this matter, and then prepared to give this list to Professor Shi-Erfu. After all, Professor Lars Myrna was too old. Dake didn't want to disturb him over such a small matter, so he could only let the vice principal deal with this matter. He had always thought that it was fine for children to be naughty, but they couldn't have no bottom line. As a student, they didn't have to respect their teachers, but at the very least, they had to have a basic respect for those who taught them. He believed that Professor Shi-Erfu would handle this matter well. This is everyone. Dake picked up the list filled with names and looked at it under the light. Anna blinked and nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Dake tapped the table with his knuckles and looked up at her with a faint smile. "You're not going to write your own name?" Anna's eyes flashed, and she immediately showed a shocked and confused expression. Why do I have to write my own name? Is it to praise me?" Dake put down the list and reached for the apple juice. He said nonchalantly, "After all, this was planned by you and Inchi. If I only wrote their name and didn't write yours, wouldn't it be unfair to them?" Anna's eyes widened and she looked confused. "Dake, what are you talking about? Why don't I understand?" "Okay, stop acting." Dake turned around and said, "Actually, I'm quite curious. Why didn't you write Inchi's name on the list? You didn't give in at the last minute, did you?" Anna was confused again. Why write Inchi's name? She didn't participate in this matter. "Wait, Dake, are you suspecting us?" "No way, we've known each other for so many years. Do you think we're that stupid?" Dake did as she asked and carefully looked at her face. The second princess was indeed a natural beauty. Her skin was so tender that it was almost oozing water. He couldn't help but want to pinch it. Dake quickly restrained his expression and said, "It seems that you also know that you can't escape after writing Inchi's name. For the sake of the royal family, I can let bygones be bygones this time, but there won't be a next time. You can go back now." Anna immediately frowned and said, "Are you chasing me away? You haven't talked to me since I entered the school. Now that I've taken the initiative to visit you, you're chasing me away so quickly. I must tell Sister Eliza." Dake stretched his body, leaned back and said with a smile, "What's the use of telling her? Will she eat me up? If you don't leave now, there will be one more person on this list." "Humph," Anna muttered to herself. She immediately turned around and deliberately stomped on the floor, making a paw-paw-paw sound. After she left, Dake called the magician's secretary and remembered the people on the list one by one according to the scan record of the magician's secretary. Anna and Inchi's names would not appear on the list, but this didn't prevent him from telling the whole story to Professor Shi-Erfu. As for whether the two princesses would be punished, it would depend on Professor Shi-Erfu's opinion. Today's Shungmalian Academy was also in a critical period. Punishing the two princesses was a small matter, but the political impact would be deliberately magnified by people with ulterior motives. Therefore, in the end it would probably be a secret warning. However, when the people on the list found out that only they were punished, and the two princesses were not involved, they would definitely have more considerations in the future. If the two princesses wanted to cause trouble again, it wouldn't be so simple. I hope that this way, these first-year children will be able to calm down and not create a tripartite balance of power all day. Can the first-year aristocrats be divided into 3 groups? Thinking of this, Dake couldn't help but shake his head and want to laugh. In the blink of an eye, it was Saturday. Dake went to the common lounge after the morning exercise and waited for Anna and Luosi to arrive. Because of the morning exercise, most of the second-year students were forced to develop the good habit of sleeping early and waking up early. In addition, there were new duelists this morning, so the common lounge was already filled with people. At this time, the 7 pioneers who had already become duelists last semester were relaxed. Doran made a sign with the words, "Go Pitin" on it. Pitin looked a little nervous. Doran was massaging his shoulders to relax his muscles. The other second-year contestants were also talking to each other, trying to ease the tension. Dake didn't have to wait long before Anna and Luosi appeared at the top of the stairs. Luosi walked in front, and Deanna pushed her from behind. She used a hairband to tie her light blonde hair into 2 bunches, which was rare. She also touched her lips with a little lip gloss, which made her look more delicate than usual. After all, it was her first official duel in her life, so she dressed up carefully. In contrast, Deanna looked a lot more casual. She pushed Luosi forward while shouting. She also held a cardboard self-made card in her hand. It looked like a new layer of cardboard was pasted on top of the cardboard that Luosi used before. In the middle of the cardboard, there was a little pink rabbit, surrounded by a big heart. Below the rabbit, there was a familiar bear and cat. Around it were the words "Go" and "Victory." "This time, it's our turn to cheer for you." Dake took the cardboard from Deanna's hand and waved it in front of Luosi. Luosi's cheeks were slightly red, and she nodded quietly. "Thank you." When almost all the second-year students of the Aristocrat Academy arrived, they all rushed out of the tower and walked towards the cafeteria. The students of the 4 academies gathered at the cafeteria almost at the same time. After breakfast, they all set out together to the open-air duel arena. The open-air duel arena of the Shungmalian Academy was as grand as ever, shining brightly under the morning sun. The second-year students were already very familiar with the arena, and they walked in while talking and laughing. After that, more than 100 people poured into the contestants' passage, and only a small number of people turned towards the inner ring of the arena. With so many people participating, the probability of getting a senior student should not be high, right? At the entrance of the contestants' passage, Deanna spread her fingers and supported her chin, looking like a famous detective. "I hope so." Luosi used a smile to hide the nervousness in her heart. Even though she had performed very well in the duel club's recruitment competition, she was still only a second-year student. If she were to encounter a third-year student, it would be a tough fight. Everyone hoped that their debut battle would end in victory. If she were to encounter a third-year student, no matter how wonderful her performance was, she would still lose. Moreover, in last semester's debut battle, both Dake and Deanna had won. Luosi did not want to lose no matter what. Her gaze swept across the crowd, and she did not find any third-year students. Her heart was slightly relieved. A lion will use all its strength even when hunting a rabbit. Dake saw through her thoughts and reminded her. Luosi nodded. "I will definitely do my best." Dake nodded. "Your uncle and aunt should be here to watch, right?" Luosi could not help but turn to the audience. Should? With a trace of anticipation and even more nervousness, Luosi separated from her 2 friends and entered the contestants' passage. Following closely behind, Luobot, who had been encouraged by White, also entered the contestants' passage. Because there were too many contestants registered this morning, the open-air duel arena opened 4 venues at the same time. The students would duel in each of the 4 venues. Venue 2, the 6th match. "Let's wait here." Dake found a suitable seat in the ring and pulled Deanna to sit down. The 2 placed their cheering cards in the middle and looked around at the same time. Since the debut battle on the second Saturday morning of the first semester of the new school year had become a fixed event, many senior students would come to watch at this time every year. The ring was quickly filled with people. Almost all of the second-year professors were present. Professor Shi Erfu had a straight face as usual, and Professor Pawacheong-si had a serious expression on his face. At 8 o'clock sharp, behind the ring, the space in the audience seats suddenly distorted. Then one by one, the audience members appeared in the audience seats. Viscount Flotty and her wife, as well as Luosi's tutor, were among them. With the arrival of the audience and the contestants, the match began. The 4 commentators stepped onto the commentary platform. Their voices sounded almost at the same time. It was a bit chaotic. But if the audience focused on one of the venues, they would find that the sounds of the other 3 venues would gradually disappear. Only the sounds of the venue would be left in their ears. This was a new experience for the new audience. But for those who watched the duels regularly, they were already familiar with it. The commentator in charge of Venue 2 was a third-year senior. She was also a newcomer, so she could not help but feel a bit nervous. But as she commentated one match after another, her speech became clearer and clearer. Her thinking became faster and faster. She had already begun to show the qualities of a professional commentator. In the blink of an eye, an hour passed. When the bell rang at 9 o'clock, the contestants of the sixth match in Venue 2 finally stepped onto the stage. The commentator, Barty Morris, immediately said excitedly, "This year's newcomer duelists have brought us many surprises. Every duel can be said to be brilliant and varied. Next up are two newly promoted Year 2 duelists. Let us welcome them." First up is the red team contestant, Luo C. Flotti from the second-year Aristocratic Academy. Next is the blue team contestant, also from the second year, a newcomer from the Knight Academy, Luo Boat Broheim. Aristocratic Academy versus Knight Academy. A classic is always memorable. Before the match begins, let us give the two contestants the warmest applause. Good morning, C Epsilon 3. Chapter 562. In the inner auditorium of the Circular Belt. When Dake heard the name Luo Boat Broheim, he said in surprise, "Luo Boat passed." I thought. Deanna was also at a loss. I don't know. But if Luo C's opponent is Luo Boat, he should win, right? Dake's eyes turned slightly, but he remembered the vampire magic card in Luo Boat's hand, and he couldn't help but say, if he doesn't use those magic cards he shouldn't be a threat, but that's not for sure. After all, Luo Boat was only a second-year student. He had just started on the path of magic, and was far from the end. Therefore, no matter what kind of level he showed, there was no need to be surprised. Moreover, Luo Boat had passed the assessment of the recruit competition. Even if he was beaten badly, his basic strength shouldn't be bad. The magic ball of life enchantment of the rookie competition only had 2,000 points of magic power, and the number of magic cards in a set of cards only needed to be at least 20. The overall strength requirement for the duelists was relatively low, and any accident could happen. Therefore, it was best not to jump to conclusions before the results were out. Otherwise, it would be a bad idea. Dake's eyes became a little more serious as he looked at the field. He remembered the URL. VIP can't you? VIP in the seat next to him. White Gouda looked quite tense and nervous. Luo Boat passing the assessment of the duel club was a complete surprise for them. But Luo C's performance in the recruit competition was extremely amazing. The current situation was like an ordinary student with a score of 60 challenging an excellent student with a score of 100. If Luo Boat hadn't gained something this week, he wouldn't even have the slightest chance of winning. Even so, Luo Boat's chances of winning were very slim. It's time to test fate. Come on, Luo Boat. White couldn't help but clench his fingers. Outside the ring, in the spectator stands. When the Viscountess and Viscountess heard Luo C's name, their furrowed brows finally relaxed. Regardless of whether it was because of their feelings or because they wanted to get a return on their investment, they were all eager to see Luo C appear on the stage. Now that Luo C had stepped onto the stage, he had already met their requirements. The outcome of the duel wasn't that important anymore. Even so, Viscount Flotti remained expressionless, and the Viscount's wife tightly clutched her handbag. On the other hand, Luo C's tutor, Debbie Giles, looked relaxed. She was a graduate of Shangmalian College, so she was very familiar with the standard of a second-year student. The talent Luo C. Flotti displayed during the holidays was definitely one of the best in the academy. After 3 months of intensive tutoring, she had been reborn. As for her opponent, the follower of the hero's son, Debbie had heard of him in the academy. He was just someone whose fists were faster than his brains. No matter how you think about it, Luo C can't lose. The duel between the two newcomers attracted a lot of attention. Some people even moved to the spectator stands to watch. The classic duels between the Aristocratic College and the Knight College always attracted attention. The Representative Society of the Knight College, the Sports Society, and the Representative Society of the Aristocratic College, the Aristocratic History Research Society, were also quietly facing off. Of course, they were just looking for a reason to look at each other. It had nothing to do with the two duelists themselves. Dueling Stage 2. Luo Boat and Luo C stepped onto the stage one after the other. It was the first time they had stepped onto this kind of formal duel, so they couldn't help but feel a bit nervous. In contrast, Luo Boat was even more carefree. He only swallowed a mouthful of saliva and quickly adapted. He even leisurely waved at White. Luo-si, on the other hand, was a lot more nervous. After she stepped onto the stage, she almost subconsciously glanced at the spectator stands. Only when the figure of Deanna waving a card entered her field of vision did she feel a bit more at ease. Her gaze then rested on Dake for a while before turning to the spectator stands outside. But the spectator stands were a sea of people, and Viscount Flotty were inconspicuous among them. She couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Hey, as if sensing Luo-si's low spirits, Luo-boat suddenly called out after activating the card table. Luo-si reflexively raised her head and saw Luo-boat winking at her. Luo-boat immediately said, "Cheer up, this is a duel. If you lose to me because you're distracted, I'll also be in a lot of trouble. I don't want people to say that I won with an unfair advantage." After hearing this, Luo-si immediately took a deep breath and said, "A lion will use all its strength even when hunting a rabbit. I'll do my best." Very good. Luo-boat couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth, but the next moment he suddenly came back to his senses and said angrily, "Wait, who are you calling a rabbit? I'm from the Academy of Knights. Only a lion fits my status." "Up to you." Luo-si completely relaxed and put the card deck into the card slot on the card table. Following the activation of both sides' card tables, the words "Preparation Stage" appeared in the air above the arena. The referee's whistle sounded, and the magic power of the life barrier of the magic conducting balls appeared in front of both players' stands. The card tables shuffled automatically. A countdown timer of 30s appeared on the right side of the preparation stage. Luo-boat and Luo-si drew cards at almost the same time, and 5 magic conducting cards quickly appeared in their hands. Then, their gazes swept over them, and the two of them pondered at the same time. The open-air duel arena was 120 by 80, and as the arena was enlarged, all kinds of techniques and tactics had to be adjusted accordingly. At this moment, whether it was the audience or the players in the arena, they all focused their attention. Dake's gaze swept over the faces of the two, and discovered that Luo-boat's face was beaming with joy, while Luo-si was frowning slightly. The 30-second countdown passed in the blink of an eye. The preparation stage became the battle stage. Let the battle begin. Following the sound of the countdown, both sides immediately began to summon their magic-conducting spirits. The degree of mastery of the two duelists' summoning spells was also displayed in this comparison. Luo-si used less than 5 seconds to complete his summoning. Luo-boat, on the other hand, used at least 7 seconds. The difference of several seconds didn't seem like much, but when accumulated little by little, it was considerable. Most importantly, the shorter casting time of the summoning spell would provide more time for the duelist to think. In a magic-conducting duel, apart from the immediate control of the situation, it was essentially a showdown of brains. Especially in a situation where the lineup of the two duelists was similar, whoever thought faster, who was faster in the duel, who was more experienced, and who was more advanced in strategy, would have an easier time gaining the upper hand. Under the watchful eyes of the audience, the first magic-conducting spirit that Luo-si summoned appeared in the red team's summoning area. It was a grinning pink-furred rabbit. "Stray rabbit, strengthen your legs." Under Luo-si's loud command, the stray rabbit leaped out of the summoning array and stomped its feet. Layers of ripples appeared under its feet, and a pink light wrapped around its ankles like a pair of boots. This pink rabbit, which was about 1.2 meters tall, squinted its eyes in an instant and waved the crowbar in its hand, charging towards the blue team's summoning area. Card name, Stray Rabbit. Type, Sprite card. Level, *****. Race, bird/beast. Attribute, fighting. Magic power, 1100. Attack, 1400. Defense, 700. Killing skills, Crowbar of the Wanderer. Strengthen your legs, Wanderer's Dance. At this moment, Luo-boat's magic-conducting spirit appeared in the blue team's summoning area. It was a magic-conducting spirit that was 3 meters in length, width, and height, and looked like a small castle. It looks a bit like his magic beast castle. Dake pondered outside the arena. Then he saw Luo-boat's finger flick and directly control the blue magic ball to fly into the castle. This kind of shameless tactic was the complete opposite of Luo Boat's reckless style in the Duel Club's recruitment competition. But he wasn't the only one with a different style. Luo Si had always used a defensive counterattack tactic, but today he was different from his usual self. He started with a strong attack. After the two contestants summoned their respective magic-conducting spirits, the commentator Barty Morris immediately raised his voice. An unexpected start. The Stray Rabbit, summoned by contestant Luo Si Flati, is a very standard 3-star magic-conducting spirit. The crowbar of the Wanderer in its hand can increase its attack by 300 points, allowing it to reach a maximum attack of 1,700 points. Very few 3-star magic-conducting spirits can resist its attack. But the Toy Castle, summoned by contestant Luo Boat Broheim, has a defense as high as. Look. The two sides have made contact. The disadvantage of the summoning speed limited the display of the starting strategy. Luo Si's Stray Rabbit, under the effect of Strengthen Your Legs, crossed a distance of 100 meters at an extremely fast speed, and chopped down on Luo Boat's Toy Castle with its crowbar. Bang! Sparks flew, and a corner of the Toy Castle, with a defense of 2,000 points, was chopped off. A pink streamer of light appeared on the Stray Rabbit's body. It was a sure kill skill that could increase its attack. Wanderer's Dance. But Luo Boat didn't panic because the Toy Castle's defense was broken. He very calmly commanded, "Activate the sure kill skill. Immovable Fort Remnant." The broken part of the Toy Castle immediately turned into a steel shell that clung to the castle, strengthening its defense layer by layer. Every time the Stray Rabbit attacked, the Toy Castle's magic power would be reduced. But the Toy Castle's defense also increased layer by layer. Finally, after reaching a certain point, even with the support of Wanderer's Dance, the Stray Rabbit was unable to break through the Toy Castle's defense. Barbara Morris couldn't close her mouth for a long time. Whether it was Wanderer's Dance or Immovable Fort Remnant, they were both extremely rare sure kill skills. She couldn't react for a while. But the situation on the field wouldn't end because of her stagnation. Luo Si immediately started a second summoning after the cooldown of the usual summoning spell ended. The second magic elf that appeared in the red summoning area was the Soundbug that she had summoned last night. The Soundbug's appearance was like a palm-sized golden-shelled insect, but there were luminous glands at its tail that could emit different colors according to the rhythm. Although it was a 3-star magic elf, its attributes were extremely low except for defense, and its sure kill skills weren't strong. Card name, Soundbug. Type, Elf card. Level, *****. Race, Insect. Attribute, Bug. Magic power, 700. Attack, 300. Defense, 1400. Sure kill skills, Sound Barrier, Sound Scale Tour. Although its defense was considerable, its palm-sized body was completely unable to act as a shield for the magic ball. In Luo Si's deck, the Soundbug was used as a sacrifice and as a companion to the Mobius bug. But there was no Mobius bug in her hand. Although it was much slower, Luo Boat also summoned his second magic elf in the first round. A steel rat man with only half of its face left appeared on the Toy Castle. This wasn't a 2-star Ratman cyborg, but a 3-star magic elf that Luo Boat had refined during the holidays. Steelgun Ratman. Card name, Steelgun Ratman. Type, Elf card. Level, ****. Race Machine. Attribute, Steel. Magic power, 1300. Attack, 1300. Defense, 1400. Sure kill skills, Steelgun Gold Eater. As soon as the Steelgun Ratman appeared, it took out a thick metal gun from its back. The mechanical eye on the left side flashed with a cold red light, and the gun was aimed at the Stray Rabbit that was crazily hacking at the Toy Castle. Boom! A gunshot rang out. The metal bullets shot out from the steel gun, instantly pierced through the Stray Rabbit's body. Although the Stray Rabbit had already dodged under Luo Si's emergency command, its abdomen was still pierced through, and a large amount of magic power was lost. Retreat! Luo Si's eyes flashed, and he chose a conservative tactic between radical and conservative. The Stray Rabbit immediately retreated. Bang bang bang! The Steelgun Ratman suddenly raised the steel gun and fired 3 shots in a row. Each bullet consumed 100 points of magic power. After a total of 4 shots, its magic power was reduced to 900 points. But except for the first shot, the other 3 shots all missed. The stray rabbit was very fast under the leg enhancement, and the injury on its abdomen didn't affect it. The steel gun Ratman also stopped shooting after a series of misses. It narrowed its eyes and aimed in the stray rabbit's direction. Tick. A round passed in the blink of an eye. Both sides drew their cards at the same time. Magic summoning. Magic summoning. After adding 2 magic cards into each of their hands, the 2 players summoned once again. With a wave of her hand, Rose summoned her 3rd magic guide elf from the red team's summoning zone. But it was still not the Mobius worm, but a humanoid magic elf completely composed of ice. Card name, Winter Iceman. Type, elf card. Level, *****. Race, elemental. Attribute, ice. Magic power, 1100. Attack, 1100. Defense, 1500. Killing skills, winter ice armor, winter protection. This type of magic elf with high defense was the type that Luosi often used in the Duel Club's recruitment competition. I already have 3 magic elves on my field. Luosi raised his head after the successful summoning, and a different cold voice spread out under the amplification of the sound amplification device. Luobot on the opposite player's platform quickly completed the summoning and said loudly, "The duel has just begun." On the blue side's summoning area, a humanoid magic guide sprite made of steel was standing up. Card name, Steel Fist Fighter. Type, elf card. Level, ****. Race, elemental. Attribute, steel/fighting. Magic power, 1100. Attack, 1500. Defense, 1500. Killing skills, steel fist, steel armor. This magic elf, which was of the same elemental type as the Winter Iceman, also had a very similar body shape to the Winter Iceman, but the body composition of the 2 magic elves was completely different. One was made of ice, and the other was made of steel. Steel Fist Fighter, steel armor. A bright brilliance lit up on the body of the Steel Fist Fighter, and a layer of extremely dense steel armor condensed, making the Steel Fist Fighter's originally slender body stronger, and its defense was effectively improved. Luobot immediately issued a further order, letting the Steel Pike Ratman and the Steel Fist Fighter rush into the red area together and launch an attack. In the red area, the Winter Iceman stood in front of the magic ball, exuding an extremely cold air all over his body, condensing into armor. The stray rabbit, with little magic power left, and the palm-sized scale bug were on both sides of the Winter Iceman. The 3 magic elves stood in a triangular formation, vaguely forming a battle formation. Luosi chuckled and raised one of the magic cards in her hand to the sky. In the Duel Club's recruitment competition, as long as she successfully activated this magic card, not a single magic elf on the field fell. Is it coming? Luosi Flotty's triangular defense. Professor Pawa Cheongsi leaned back in his chair, hands on his chest, squinting his eyes and whispering. In the early 2nd year, her defense is indeed difficult to break. Come on, Luosi. Deanna suddenly raised the sign and waved it hard. The pink rabbit on the sign was weak and cute. Dake watched the battle seriously beside her, but most of his eyes were on Luobot. He wanted to see if Luobot had a way to break it. That would bring him a little surprise. In life, a little more surprise was a little more fun. In the name of Luosi Flotty, magic summoning, Aurora Link. A colorful aurora fell from the sky and turned into a colorful chain of light that penetrated the bodies of the 3 magic elves. The magic power of the 3 magic elves merged under the effect of this Aurora Link. Every 3 seconds, an aurora fell from the sky and healed the 3 magic elves in the link. Luosi's eyes were full of confidence. The stray rabbit, who was in full condition, raised the crowbar again and rushed to the Iron Fist Fighter and the Steel Pike Ratman with a grin. The Winter Iceman put his hands together, and the ball of light condensed from his palms suddenly shot out, but it hit the back of the stray rabbit and put a layer of winter ice armor on its body. With the ice blue armor, the stray rabbit's fragile body was strengthened, and its biggest weakness was also made up for. It opened its scarlet eyes wide, showing madness in its eyes, and smashed the crowbar at the tall and strong Iron Fist fighter. Without fear. Boom. The Iron Fist fighter, with iron armor, was indestructible, and it waved Iron Fist to counterattack. But every punch that fell on the stray rabbit would be affected by the cold of winter ice armor, making its attack speed slow, and the damage it caused to the stray rabbit was almost negligible after sharing the damage. An aurora fell, and the stray rabbit could heal itself. Under this situation, the Iron Fist fighter, which originally had the advantage in strength, was crazily suppressed by the stray rabbit. Even if the Steel Pike Ratman hid behind and fired shots, it could not change the overall situation. Stray Rabbit, Sonic Bug, and Winter Iceman added up to a total of 2,900 magic points. Unless one had the powerful strength to kill one of the magic elves in 3 seconds, or had the ability to disintegrate Aurora Link, it was impossible to break through this absolute defense. Luoboat seemed to be fierce, but in fact, he did not have the ability to break it at all. I thought Luoboat had some hidden means to break it. It turns out that he doesn't have any? Dake froze for a moment, and was slightly disappointed. Luoboat did not seem to add the magic card left by Vlad the Vampire to the deck. Otherwise he could just use the ritual card to summon the Vampire Earl. And he could break it by brute force. Looking at the current situation, Luoboat could only rely on the strong defense of the Iron Fist fighter to barely hold on. Once the Iron Fist fighter was broken, the immobile toy castle was just a bone that was harder to chew, and it would eventually be broken. Knowing that Luoc had Aurora Link, he obviously should not recklessly send the Iron Fist fighter and the Steel Pike Ratman to attack. But if it was Luoboat's action, it didn't seem so difficult to accept. Dake suddenly became a little silent. He glanced at the nearby white, but found that he was punching the air and did not die. Could it be? Dake could not help but look at the field again. With a sharp sound, the sonic barrier of the Sonic Bug was instantly activated and surrounded the area where the Iron Fist fighter and the stray rabbit were, so that the orders of the players from both sides could not be transmitted through the barrier. It also completely cut off Luoboat's hope of a comeback. But Luoboat did not give up. There was even a hint of excitement in his eyes. Steel Pike Ratman single soldier breakthrough. The Steel Pike Ratman, who was following from a distance, was not surrounded by the sonic barrier. He did it on purpose. With the Sonic Bug, Luoc would definitely use the sonic barrier to be safe. But while the sonic barrier trapped the Iron Fist fighter, it also trapped the stray rabbit. In this way, only the Winter Iceman and the Sonic Bug were left between the Steel Pike Ratman and the Sonic Bug. With the Steel Pike Ratman's attack, he only needed 2 shots to completely shatter the red magic ball's life enchantment. Luoboat suddenly focused and held a new magic card tightly between his 2 fingers. Just as he said, his duel had just begun. Good morning. Chapter 563. In the second round, time passed very quickly. Both sides were unable to use the time accurately down to the second. The battle in the arena took up too much of their attention. This was a common problem for new duelists. They were unable to command and summon at the same time. If the cooldown of the summoning skill was reduced to the limit of 3 seconds, it would greatly increase the margin of error. Luoc still had 3 cards in his hand. They were not useless, but he could not make a decision at the moment. Luoboat had 4 cards left in his hand. However, after Luoc ordered the Sonic Bug to release the sound-absorbing barrier, he immediately began to summon a new magic card. It was not a magic elf card, but an equipment card. Equipment cards were a type of item card. They were widely used in magic duels. Remember, https://mfipcanshu. VIP. In order to refine this equipment card, Luoboat spent a lot of time during the holidays to learn the knowledge and application of weapons and armor from the veterans. After returning to the academy, he integrated this knowledge and refined a weapon and armor, respectively. The armor was used many times in the Duel Club's recruitment competition. Unfortunately, the opponents he encountered were not defeated with just one armor. It was only a week after the recruitment competition that he managed to craft another weapon. In the name of Luo-Boat Broheim, I summon the Gale repeating crossbow. The Ratman opened his bloody mouth, revealing his extremely sharp triangular teeth. He stuffed the steel blunderbuss into his mouth and chewed crazily. This action triggered the gold-eating passive, which allowed him to recover his magic power and obtain a temporary, strong attack buff, increasing his attack power by 100 points. Although the increase of 100 points was not much, it was better than nothing. Moreover, after eating the steel blunderbuss, his hands were free. The steel-barreled Ratman stretched out his hand, and the stream of light that descended from the sky gathered in his hand. Soon after, an exquisitely designed crossbow appeared. Card name, Gale repeating crossbow type. Item card effect. Arrow attack plus 150. Consumes 50 MP to perform a single shot, 150 MP to perform a single double shot, 300 MP to perform a single triple shot. Cooldown, 3 seconds/6 seconds/10 seconds. The steel-barreled Ratman grabbed his crossbow and started running. The new weapon gave it a new movement module. A weapon card. Like a crossbow was not something that any magic elf could use freely. However, the Steel Pike Ratmen had a sure kill skill called Steel Pike, and they had an innate talent for such weapons, allowing them to shoot accurately. More importantly, Luo-Boat had never used this Gale repeating crossbow in front of others. No one would have thought that this crossbow could shoot 3 powerful crossbow bolts at once. These 3 crossbow bolts were like an extension of the Steel Gun Ratman's attack. Each of them could deal around 1,300 plus 100 plus 150 is equal to 1,550 damage. As long as one of the 3 crossbow bolts hit the target, and the other grazed the target, the match would be over. Compared to the steel pike that could only fire a single shot, the Gale repeating crossbow was undoubtedly more unexpected and impossible to guard against. Luo-Boat calmed down, and his eyes were sharp. Tick. When the steel-barreled Ratman bypassed the sound-absorbing barrier and rushed into the red half of the field from the edge of the field, the sound of the turn switching sounded. Both players drew their cards at the same time. At this time, Luo-C did not notice that danger was approaching. After all, the crushing victory in the Duel Club's recruitment competition had made her overconfident. Once a person stood too high, it was easy to ignore what was beneath their feet. She did notice that the steel-barreled Ratman had rushed into the half of the field, but she did not think that a 3-star magic elf could break through the defense of the Winter Iceman. Although Winter Ice armor was used on Stray Rabbit, the Winter Iceman still had a sure kill skill called Winter Protection. Therefore, when she drew her cards from the deck, she looked calm. But just as she looked down at the 2 new magic cards, Luo-Boat accurately seized this opportunity and suddenly shouted, "Now triple shot!" His voice spread throughout the field through the loudspeaker. White, who was outside the field, clenched his fist and hammered down hard. His eyes were shining. When the Gale repeating crossbow was summoned, he guessed Luo-Boat's tactic. Although this was a tactic that could only be used once, it was already significant to be able to win this game. No one wanted to be defeated in the Dao battle. Only the winner could be remembered forever. White's battle did not go well, and naturally, he wanted to see Luo-Boat work hard with his regrets. This is the turning point of victory. He stared at the field. Dake, who was nearby, suddenly had a bad feeling. Deanna's cheers also stopped abruptly. The audience seemed to have realized that something big is coming from Luo-Boat's cheers. Almost at the same time, they focused their attention on the steel gun Ratman that had received the order. The Ratman robot only had half of its face left, and it instantly stood still. It placed the Tempest repeating crossbow on its left arm, and the mechanical eye on its left face emitted a blinding red light. A laser-like line of sight shot out from its eye, and it passed through the center axis of the Tempest repeating crossbow and shone on the red magic ball. Its intention was exposed at this moment. But the moment the red light shone on the red magic ball, the steel gun Ratman's magic power had already been channeled into the Gale repeating crossbow, under the guidance of the sure kill skill. The surging magic power condensed on the Gale repeating crossbow and formed 3 arrows. Then, starting from the first arrow, there was almost no gap. The 3 arrows were fired in succession. These 3 arrows were almost completely aligned with the line of sight. The distance between the 2 arrows was not more than the length of the arrow. Whoosh! The sound of the 3 arrows being fired in succession formed a line. Luosi, who was on the red platform, suddenly reacted, but the 3 arrows were already flying in the air. In just a moment, the first arrow had passed through between the Winter Iceman and the Sonic Bug. It was less than 2 meters away from the red magic ball. Winter Guard. Almost subconsciously, Luosi shouted out the other sure-kill skill of the Winter Iceman. The Winter Iceman reacted quickly after hearing the command. He waved his hand fiercely, and an ice mist spurted out from his palm. The icy mist instantly pounced on the red magic ball, but it didn't manage to intercept the first bolt. It instantly condensed into an ice wall, but it happened to freeze the second arrow in the wall. Only 1 arrow stuck out. Almost, this arrow would have passed through the ice wall and hit the red magic ball. Boom, boom. There were 2 loud noises in succession. The first loud noise came from the collision between the first arrow and the red magic ball. The magic ball's enchantment of life was pierced through in an instant. It did not stop until it hit the magic ball inside the enchantment of life. And the magic value of the enchantment of life also dropped by 1,500 points in an instant. The enchantment of life with only 500 points of magic value was full of cracks, as if it would break at any time. The second loud noise came from the collision between the third arrow and the ice wall. Winter's protection finally managed to block the third crossbow bolt. Although cracks had appeared on the ice wall, it had still managed to block the third arrow that was coming with such ferocity. Suddenly, the ice wall under the control of the Winter Iceman turned a corner and circled around the red magic ball, encircling it. Then the ice wall spread to the other hand of the Winter Iceman. The hands of the Winter Iceman slammed together, and the ice wall was forced to twist an arc at the end and stuck together in front of him. It formed a complete circle. The noise in the field stopped. Whether it was the steel-barreled Ratman, who launched the attack, or the Winter Iceman, who defended, they all stopped moving. And their masters, Luoboat on the blue platform and Luosi on the red platform, both had ugly expressions on their faces. Luosi paid the price for her overconfidence and potential contempt for Luoboat. The red magic ball's enchantment of life only had 500 points of magic power left. Luoboat also did not grasp the turning point of victory. The remaining 500 points were also left. This indefensible triple arrow was blocked by the Winter Iceman. Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. Luoboat took a deep breath. Just this little bit of difference was likely to determine whether he could reach victory. No, the duel is not over yet. After a short pause, he gritted his teeth and looked at the 2 magic cards that he had just obtained. The 2 magic cards that emitted a faint red light under the stimulation of magic were Blood Beast and Bloodbat. It was morning at this time, and the secret ritual card Dark Blood Sacrifice, Vampire Earl, that could only be activated after the night fell was not effective. Therefore Luoboat only put Blood Beast and Bloodbat into the deck. Although these 2 magic cards were not used in the Duel Club's recruitment contest, after discovering that the opponent was Luosi, Luoboat could not resist adding them to the deck. Now it was finally the winner. Blood Beast was a 5-star magic card, but its strength was only average among the 5-star magic cards. On the contrary, the 3-star Bloodbat was excellent and had a very powerful sure-kill skill, Blood Source Explosion. Luoboat's eyes flashed, and he pulled out Bloodbat from his hand and suddenly summoned it. However, before he could do so, Luosi, who had barely regained his composure, had already started summoning. On the red side summoning area, a huge pitch-black sphere was slowly floating out of the complicated summoning array. There seemed to be divine light circulating around this black sphere, and its entire body was round and flawless. It was Luosi's strongest 3-star magic fairy, the Mobius Worm. Beep! When the Mobius Worm was summoned, the scale bug became active at a speed visible to the naked eye, almost immediately flying to the top of the Mobius Worm's head and circling. Scale performance. Luosi immediately ordered. The scale bug's flight path instantly changed, and the luminous glands at its tail flickered frequently. A melodious melody drilled out of its small body, attracting the attention of the audience. The number 1 quietly appeared above the Mobius worm's head. Once this energy scale changed from 1 to 7, the Mobius worm would be able to release an extremely powerful, ultrasonic wave. When the Mobius worm's core killer skill, the Mobius loop, was understood, almost no one would order the magic fairy to attack it. The Mobius worm could not accumulate energy if it did not receive an attack, and the appearance of the scale bug solved this problem. All that was needed next was to wait. The notes that jumped every 3 seconds were like a death-hastening talisman that ravaged the opponent's nerves. In the name of Luoboat Broheim, I summoned the Bloodbat. A glaring red light lit up on the card surface, and the Bloodbat drilled out with a sharp whistle. Attack the magic conducting ball. Luoboat issued an order very decisively. The Bloodbat had an excellent aerial advantage, and the Winter Iceman's 2 killer skills had already been used, so there was no protection above the red magic conducting ball. They had to break the magic conducting ball's life enchantment in the next 18 seconds. At the same time, the steel-barreled Ratman set up the Gale crossbow, again under his command. Even if they could not break through the ice wall created by the winter protection, it was not difficult to use the crossbow to distract the Winter Iceman. His command was very clear, and the target of the attack was also very clear. The Winter Iceman alone could not stop the Bloodbat's air attack. After only a few seconds, the Bloodbat had appeared above the red magic conducting ball. It spread its wings and suddenly swooped down, looking ferocious. The Winter Iceman, who had received the order to protect the magic conducting ball, did not hesitate to choose to resist the crossbow bolts and protect the magic conducting ball behind him. On the red platform, Luo, who was very familiar with the Bloodbat's killer skill, was sweating on his forehead. His lips moved quickly, and a magic conducting card in his hand gradually glowed. Luoboat's voice rose high. Blood resistance ring. Squeak. The Bloodbat suddenly screamed as it approached the ground, and a blood-colored halo burst out from its body in an instant. Although it was not aggressive, the halo's thrust was extremely strong, and it forcibly pushed the Winter Iceman outwards. Looking at the red magic conducting ball without any protection, the Bloodbat could not help but show its ferocious fangs. Magic conducting summon. Aurora Veil. But at the critical moment, Luo completed the final summon. A layer of colorful aurora instantly brushed out and blocked the Bloodbat that swooped down. The Aurora Veil extended outwards in an extremely exaggerated manner, resonating with the Aurora link on the 3 magic conducting elves. In an instant, a huge curtain covered the red half of the arena. Luoboat stared at the digital scale that kept jumping above the Mobius worm's head and made the calmest judgment at this critical moment. Bloodbat, blood source explosion. Boom! The sound of the explosion was earth-shattering. The Aurora Veil was torn apart by the terrifying impact. This fierce duel that lasted for 3 rounds was coming to an end. Good morning. Chapter 564. It's over. When the Aurora Veil was torn apart by the Bloodbat's self-destruction, this sentence popped up in the minds of almost all the audience members. The pace of a magic duel was so fast that it was hard for people to breathe. They wished they could slow down time 20 times and watch it frame by frame. Even though both sides of this match were only freshmen who had just entered the second year and had never summoned a second-tier magic elf, the excitement was not inferior in the slightest. The players on both sides did their best to fight each other, making people excited. The end of the duel also made people very curious. Who would be the final victor? The shattered Aurora Veil shot out a 7-colored aurora from the smoke and dust of the explosion. However, the magic power of the red magic ball did not return to 0. Mobius worm. https://mvipcanchu. VIP on the red platform. A magic light flashed on Luo's fingertips. Then he slammed them on the table and shouted loudly. Luoboat, who noticed that the match was not over, immediately started chanting, sacrificial summoning. Even though the long casting time made him feel uneasy, if he wanted to obtain the final victory, he had to find a way to summon a second-tier magic elf. As for the situation in the arena, it was already out of his control. On the arena, Iron Fist Fighter and Stray Rabbit, who were still shrouded in the sound-absorbing barrier, were still fighting fiercely. Even though Stray Rabbit had the upper hand, Iron Fist Fighter was not so easy to defeat. Luoboat's Steelgun Ratman was still waiting for an opportunity in the red half, and the Gale-repeating crossbow in his hand could be activated at any time. When the sound of the explosion and the smoke and dust gradually dissipated, the audience suddenly realized that the musical tour of the musical scale worm had not stopped. The originally melodious melody had even become intense and high-spirited. The atmosphere of the entire duel was filled with killing intent. The Mobius worm, which was floating steadily on the spot, slowly rotated with itself as the center. A halo surrounded its body like a Mobius ring, completely absorbing the impact of the explosion. The musical scale above its head jumped twice in an instant. At the same time, the red magic ball finally appeared. In the nick of time, Luosi pushed it under the body of the Mobius worm. The two spheres came into contact with each other, and at the same time, they were protected by the Mobius ring. The pulsating scale jumped from 6 to 7 in an instant when everyone looked at it. The energy storage of the Mobius worm had reached its limit. Now, ultrasound. Luosi's high-pitched voice stabilized at the last moment. The spinning of the Mobius worm suddenly stopped, and the Mobius loop around its body vibrated at a high frequency. The ear-piercing sound of the bug sounded like a high-temperature warning. Transparent ripples appeared one after another in front of the Mobius worm. Luoboat abruptly stopped sacrificial summoning and cried out in alarm, "Joint defense!" The steel-barreled Ratman heard the order and rushed toward the center like a gust of wind. A group of blood-red bats flew out from the aftermath of the explosion and flew toward the Mobius worm, while squeaking. However, it was too late. On the red platform, the girl's arm was stretched out straight. Her slender index finger pointed straight ahead. Her pale golden hair fluttered behind her, and a look of determination appeared on her delicate face. The Mobius worm responded to her will and released the ultrasonic with the most energy. The spiral-like ripples that could be seen with the naked eye instantly penetrated the entire arena. The ear-piercing sound of the bug almost pierced the eardrums. The audience subconsciously covered their ears. The indestructible toy castle had been shattered from the outside to the inside. Boom! It wasn't until the toy castle was completely reduced to dust that the steel-barreled Ratman rushed to the center and was sent flying by the aftermath. The sound-absorbing barrier in the middle of the arena was also broken at that moment. The Stray Rabbit, who had smashed the Iron Fist Fighter to the ground with a crowbar, suddenly jumped up. Its leg strength enhancement made it look like it was flying. Its slender body drew a beautiful arc in the air. In the blink of an eye, the Stray Rabbit had approached the blue magic ball. "Rise!" Luoboat suddenly focused at this critical moment. He put two fingers together like a sword and pointed at the blue magic ball. The blue magic ball, which had been exposed due to the destruction of the toy castle, jumped for a moment as if it wanted to escape upward. However, another wave of magic power closed in and stopped it abruptly. There was a distance of 100 meters between them. Luosi's ability to control magic power remotely overwhelmed Luoboat, who had the advantage of distance. Luoboat's tense face instantly twisted. He had never imagined that the difference in strength between him and his classmate would be so great. On the other hand, Luosi's expression was firm as he stood still. The Stray Rabbit held the crowbar and looked like a gorgeous swordsman. It poured all its strength into it and smashed the blue magic ball's life barrier, causing it to cave in. Then the Stray Rabbit tapped the ground with the tip of its foot and turned its body. With the power of rotation, the Stray Rabbit viciously smashed the side of the blue magic ball. Bang! The moment the life barrier was completely shattered, the blue magic ball was sent flying. The whistle signaled the end of the battle. The battle is over. Winner, Luosi Flati. A moment later, only then did the cheers suddenly burst out. The dust has settled. The commentator, Barty Morris, quickly picked up the microphone and made the final conclusion. After an intense duel, the rookie duelist from the Noble Academy, Luo C. Flotty, obtained the final victory with an astonishing performance. However, the other rookie duelist from the Knight Academy, Luo Boat Broheim, also displayed an extremely outstanding performance in this duel. Although they have just been promoted to the second year, they still have some shortcomings, but their growth in all aspects is already very obvious. As a commentator, there is nothing more delightful than seeing the duelists continue to grow. In short, I look forward to their wonderful performance in the next duel. Next, let us welcome. During Barty Morris's official speech, the two duelists on the platform had already begun to recall their magic fairy. The nerves that had been stretched to the limit during the duel also relaxed. Luo Boat gritted his teeth and loosened his clenched fist after a short moment of perseverance. Originally, when he went on stage, he didn't think that he had much chance of winning. However, after the duel began, only the desire to win was left in his mind. Now that the dust had settled, he still couldn't let it go. If only my summoning speed could be faster. If only I could summon the blood beast. Unfortunately, there were no ifs. Luo C put away the magic cards one by one, and turned her head to look at the audience. While she was looking around, she suddenly noticed that someone in the middle of the audience was waving vigorously. She couldn't help but focus her attention and finally saw the tutor, Debbie Giles, as well as her uncle and aunt sitting next to her. She quietly breathed a sigh of relief, and a trace of sweetness emerged in her heart. I don't know if uncle and aunt will be satisfied. With cautious thoughts, she slowly walked down from the platform. Not long after, Luo C and Luo Boat both entered the ring and met up with their respective friends. Deanna saw Luo C walking over, and hurriedly moved the empty seat sign away. Luo C sat down carefully. Deanna immediately grabbed her hand and praised her with an old-fashioned look. Well done. Luo C happily said, No, I almost lost. She blushed and couldn't help but glance at Dake on the other side. Dake smiled and said, Well done. Luo C couldn't help but nod and say, Yes. Deanna bit her cheek. Luo C immediately played with her. On the other side, Luo Boat was full of depression. It was the first time that White saw his friend so depressed. He didn't know how to comfort him. He thought for a long time and could only say, Win it back next time. Luo Boat clenched his fists and took a deep breath. Next time. White had an idea and said, We'll win it back this year on Halloween. Luo Boat frowned. White, that's not a duel. White quickly said, Then let's invite a duel. I remember that the minimum credit for a duel is 100 credits. We can participate in more duels to earn more credits and hone our skills at the same time. The duel between the second years. Oh right, are there any competitions that we can participate in? Luo Boat said, There's the Silver Cup for the second years. There's also the Gold Cup for everyone except the first years. There's also the Team Championship for clubs. After we're promoted to the second years, we can sign up for most of the school's competitions. White said, Then let's sign up for the Silver Cup? Luo Boat shook his head. We need to make more magic cards and build a stronger deck. White reminded him, That requires more credits and materials. Also, if we just make the cards randomly, we won't be able to make the magic fairy we want. It's a waste of resources. Luo Boat said, We can go to the underground city to get materials. White's eyes lit up and said, That's true. We'll be able to enter the underground city soon. The two of them looked at each other and smiled at the same time. Learning, taking risks, then defeating the opponent and surpassing the goal. There was no more exciting life than this. Oh right, let's go to Traveler's Street after the duel. I want to see if there are any new card packs. Let's go back and have another duel. This time I won't lose. Tactics are also part of the duel. Yes, naturally, there would be winners and losers in a duel between two people. As noon approached, the duel between the new duelists gradually came to an end. Many of them performed well, even amazingly. Of course, there were also many who performed poorly in the duel and stretched themselves to their limits. These situations were all observed by the professors. After the duel, they would carry out targeted education for the students. If the students' mental fortitude was so bad that they couldn't participate properly in the duel, they would be banned from entering the underground city. After the second year, the students would be exposed to more things, and the professors would also face more challenges. 12 o'clock sharp. The last duel ended in front of everyone's eyes. The audience began to leave the arena one after another. Viscount Flotty and his wife didn't leave immediately after Luoxi's duel ended. Instead, they continued to watch. At this moment, Viscount Flotty asked his wife, "I don't know much about duels. Is Luoxi's performance considered good?" Viscount Flotty frowned and turned to the tutor, asking, "Debbie, what do you think?" Debbie Giles couldn't help but smile. "Of course it's good. If Viscount Flotty wants to know more, you can continue to watch more duels. The second year can participate in many duels, and the possibility of Luoxi appearing is quite high." Viscount Flotty nodded slowly and said, "I'm still very free. As the saying goes, strike while the iron is hot." Before the duel ended, Dake's trio went to Traveler's Street to celebrate. Then they returned to the dormitory to do their homework. By the time they finished the rest of their homework, it was already close to night. The trio tacitly appeared in the club's classroom. Tonight their luck was pretty good. All 5 members of the club were present. Dake thought for a moment, and gathered the magic guide fairies together. Then he took out his club card. It's been more than a week since the club was established. He stood in the middle and opened his palm, letting the magic guide secretary float. "Our club's mission points are 0. We're ranked last on the Academy's club rankings." Saying this, he couldn't help but laugh. The other members of the club shrugged their shoulders and didn't seem to care. After all, the Mystical Animal Club was essentially a club. Most of the time, the club members just treated the club's classroom as a comfortable place to relax. The unique location of the spiral clock tower made the club very quiet. It was an environment where no one would disturb them. Moreover, the club's funds were enough to renovate the club's classroom according to their wishes. The considerate president would always store a large amount of snacks and tea leaves in the club's classroom. They could organize a private tea party at any time. The naive and cute catgrass and the gradually growing anti-bird added a lot of color to the club. It was so comfortable that they didn't even want to go back to the tower dormitory. Like Katrina and Brittany, they would run to the club's classroom whenever they had time. The only downside was probably the overly high stairs. Dake looked at the members and said helplessly, "But I still have to explain the rules of the club's mission. This is an excellent way to earn credits in the academy." Katrina and Brittany naturally knew about this. Dake mainly wanted to inform Deanna, Luoxi, and the Magic Guide Fairies about this. He had already applied for the commercial version, Academy card that the Magic Guide Fairies used. He would probably get it tomorrow. At that time, the Magic Guide Fairies would be able to earn credits by completing missions. This was something that they had been looking forward to all this time. "I fell asleep in front of the computer last night. I'm too tired. Gugwa. Gugwa." You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.